In today's episode, we take you to a seemingly perfect marriage that was shattered by betrayal, secrets, and a brutal murder. This is the story of Colette Jackson, a loving wife, and the devastating consequences of uncovering a secret that would destroy everything. Colette Jackson was a 36-year-old woman who lived in Lodi, New Jersey. She was known in her community as a kind-hearted and creative person who loved helping others, especially children. Colette worked as an art teacher in a local school where she taught disadvantaged kids. She believed that art could make a difference in the lives of children who didn't have much else to turn to. Colette's classroom was always full of bright colors, paintings, and drawings. She was the type of teacher who stayed late after school to help her students finish projects or just to talk if they needed someone to listen. Her passion for art wasn't just limited to the classroom. Colette lived in a modest but cozy home with her husband, Stephen Jackson. The couple had been married for nearly 10 years and appeared to have a strong and happy marriage. They often attended community events together, such as the Lodi Street Fair and the annual town Christmas parade. Colette and Stephen were well-liked by their neighbors, who often described them as a perfect couple. However, beneath the surface, Colette was dealing with more than anyone knew. In the weeks leading up to her death, Colette had been feeling increasingly stressed and anxious. She had mentioned to a close friend that she felt something was off in her marriage, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Despite her worries, Colette continued to pour herself into her work. She had recently started planning a new art program for her students, which she hoped would be ready by the fall. Colette was excited about the future and had big plans for both her career and her personal life. She had even started talking about the possibility of having children, something she and Stephen had been considering for a while. But Colette's dreams and plans would never come to fruition. She was unaware that her life was about to be tragically cut short, and the secrets that had been hidden for so long would soon come to light, changing everything. On the morning of August 14, 2013, the peaceful suburb of Lodi, New Jersey, was shaken by a horrifying discovery. At around 9:30 a.m., Angela Lagrima, a close friend of Colette Jackson, arrived at the Jackson home for their regular coffee date. Angela and Colette had been friends for years, often spending time together chatting about life, work, and their mutual love for art. That morning, Angela expected nothing more than a relaxing visit with her friend. But as she approached the house, she noticed that something seemed off. The curtains were drawn, and the front door, usually open to let in the morning light, was tightly shut. When Angela entered the living room, she was met with a scene that would haunt her forever. Colette was lying on the floor, her throat slit so deeply that her neck was nearly severed. Blood had cooled around her, staining the carpet a dark red. The sight was so shocking that Angela froze, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. After a few moments, she snapped out of her shock and frantically dialed 911, her hands shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the phone. Angela's voice was barely steady as she spoke to the emergency operator, describing what she had found. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what had happened. She couldn't believe that her friend, the kind and gentle Colette, had met such a violent end. The operator instructed Angela to wait outside until the police arrived, which she did, standing on the front lawn, numb and in disbelief. As she waited, Angela couldn't help but think about the last time she had seen Colette, just a few days earlier. They had met up for lunch at a local diner, talking and laughing as they always did. Colette had seemed a bit tired, but otherwise fine. Now, just days later, she was gone, and the life she had been so passionate about had been brutally taken from her. The Lodi Police Department received the 911 call at 9:45 a.m. on August 14, 2013. Within minutes, officers arrived at the Jackson home, quickly securing the area. Detective Frank Marino, a 20-year veteran of the force known for his calm demeanor and meticulous attention to detail, led the investigation. Marino had seen his share of crime scenes, but the brutality of this one struck him immediately. As the police entered the house, they were met with the stark contrast between the cozy, lived-in space and the gruesome scene in the living room. Colette Jackson's lifeless body lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood that had soaked into the carpet. Her throat had been slit with such force that it nearly severed her neck. The blood spatter on the walls and nearby furniture indicated a violent struggle. Marino took a moment to absorb the scene before instructing his team to begin the investigation. The crime scene was treated with the utmost care. The detectives worked methodically, photographing every angle of the room and collecting evidence. They noticed that nothing appeared to be out of place, no signs of forced entry or theft. Colette's purse was still on the kitchen counter, her keys next to it. Her phone was on the coffee table, untouched. This led Marino to believe that Colette had known her attacker and had not expected any danger. The murder weapon, a large kitchen knife, was found near Colette's body, covered in blood. Marino instructed the forensic team to bag the knife for further analysis. He also requested that they test the blood for fingerprints, hoping that the killer might have left a trace. The team dusted for prints on every surface, carefully lifting samples to be sent to the lab. As they continued their search, Marino noticed a small, partially open box in the corner of the room. Inside were prescription pill bottles, one of which was empty. Marino found this odd, given that Colette was not known to be on any heavy medication. He made a note to follow up on the pills, suspecting they could be a clue to the killer's identity. The medical examiner, Dr. Agnes Jiang, arrived shortly after and began her examination of Colette's body. Jiang, who had worked closely with Marino on previous cases, shared his preliminary findings. The deep, clean cut to the throat suggested a sharp, heavy blade and a strong hand. Jiang estimated that Colette had been dead for several hours, likely since the early hours of the morning. By the time the sun began to set, the police had gathered all the evidence they could find. The once warm and inviting home now felt cold and empty, marked by the traces of a life abruptly ended. Marino knew this was just the beginning. The next step was to unravel the mystery of who could have committed such a heinous act and why. Stephen Jackson, Colette's husband, was the first person the police investigated. At 40 years old, Stephen was a well-known accountant in Lodi. He was respected for his precision with numbers and was described by colleagues as dependable but quiet. Stephen had a routine life, early mornings, long hours at the office, and weekend golf outings with his best friend, Ernie Lagrima. On the surface, he seemed like a devoted husband, but Detective Frank Marino sensed that there was more to his story. When police first questioned Stephen, he appeared distraught, claiming to be devastated by his wife's death. He told officers that he had been out of the house the previous night, visiting his elderly mother in a nearby town. His alibi seemed solid at first, as his mother and a neighbor both confirmed that Stephen had been there until late in the evening. However, Marino wasn't entirely convinced. There was something off about Stephen's behavior. He wasn't just grieving. He seemed nervous, almost as if he were hiding something. As the interview continued, Stephen's demeanor shifted. When Marino began asking about his relationship with Colette, Stephen grew defensive. He insisted that their marriage was strong, despite the usual ups and downs. But when pressed about his whereabouts during the early morning hours of August 14, Stephen hesitated. He stammered slightly before repeating that he had been at his mother's house. Marino noted this hesitation, suspecting that Stephen wasn't telling the whole truth. The investigation took a turn when the police discovered Stephen's addiction to opiates. A search of the Jackson home uncovered several empty pill bottles hidden in Stephen's closet. The pills were prescribed to different names, raising suspicion that Stephen had been illegally obtaining them. When confronted with this evidence, Stephen initially denied any wrongdoing, but eventually he broke down and admitted to the addiction. He claimed that he had been struggling for years and that Colette didn't know about it. Stephen's addiction raised red flags for the investigators. They began to wonder if it was connected to Colette's murder. Could Stephen's drug habit have driven him to kill his wife, either in a moment of rage or to cover up his secret? Marino asked Stephen if he had ever gotten violent with Colette, but Stephen vehemently denied it, insisting that he loved her and would never hurt her. Despite Stephen's denials, Marino remained suspicious. The discovery of the opiates, combined with Stephen's inconsistent answers, suggested that there was more to his story. The police decided to keep a close eye on Stephen as they continued to piece together the events leading up to Colette's death. They needed more evidence before they could make an arrest, but Stephen was now firmly in their sights. Ernie Lagrima, Stephen's best friend, and a well-known lawyer in Lodi, was the second person the police focused on. Ernie, 52, had a reputation for being charismatic and outgoing, often the life of the party at local gatherings. He and Stephen had been friends since college, and their bond seemed unbreakable. They were known for their regular weekend golf outings, which they often talked about at the local diner, Jerry's Place, where they were regulars. But as Detective Frank Marino dug deeper into Ernie's life, he uncovered a shocking secret. The police brought Ernie in for questioning at the station. He appeared calm and cooperative, even joking with the officers as they began the interview. Ernie expressed disbelief at Colette's murder, claiming he couldn't imagine why anyone would want to harm her. He described her as a sweet, kind woman who was always supportive of Stephen. But as the questioning continued, Marino noticed a shift in Ernie's demeanor. When asked about his relationship with Stephen, Ernie became more guarded, carefully choosing his words. Marino pressed Ernie about the golf outings he and Stephen frequently took. Ernie insisted that they were just regular trips, nothing more than a chance to relax and unwind. But when Marino mentioned the possibility of something more going on during these trips, Ernie's composure faltered. He hesitated before admitting that he and Stephen had been involved in a sexual relationship for several years. They had kept it hidden from everyone, including their wives, fearing the consequences if it ever came to light. Ernie's confession was a bombshell for the investigators. It provided a possible motive for Colette's murder had she discovered the affair and threatened to expose them. Ernie insisted that Colette had no idea about the relationship and that Stephen would never have harmed her. He claimed that their relationship was based on love and that Stephen was deeply troubled by the murder. Despite Ernie's calm demeanor, Marino wasn't convinced. The affair added a new layer of complexity to the case, and Marino suspected that Ernie might be hiding more. The police decided to dig deeper into Ernie's background, checking his alibi for the night of the murder and looking into his phone records to see if there were any suspicious communications between him and Stephen. Ernie's charm and confidence couldn't erase the fact that he was now a key suspect in Colette's murder, and Marino knew they needed to keep a close watch on him. The third person under scrutiny was Angela Ligrama, Ernie's wife and a close friend of Colette. At 46, Angela was a dedicated teacher at a school for economically disadvantaged children, known for her kind heart and tireless efforts to support her students. She and Colette had shared many conversations about their work and their lives, often meeting for coffee at the local Starbucks. Angela was devastated by Colette's death, and at first glance, she seemed an unlikely suspect. However, as the investigation continued, the police uncovered information that made them reconsider. Angela was brought in for questioning the day after Ernie's confession. She appeared composed but visibly saddened, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke about Colette. Angela described Colette as a dear friend, someone she could always rely on. She insisted that she had no idea who would want to harm her. But when Detective Frank Marino began asking about her marriage, Angela's demeanor changed. She became more guarded, her answers shorter and less forthcoming. Marino pressed Angela about her knowledge of Ernie and Stephen's sexual relationship. To the surprise of the investigators, Angela admitted that she had known about the affair for some time. She explained that she had discovered them together about a year earlier, coming home early from a friend's wedding to find them curled up together in her bed. Angela said she was shocked at first, but decided against confronting Ernie. She said decided to accept it. She told the detectives that she believed in the saying different strokes for different folks, and had chosen not to interfere. This revelation cast Angela in a new light. If she had known about the affair, could she have been motivated by jealousy or anger? Marino asked if she had ever discussed the relationship with Colette, but Angela insisted that she had kept it to herself, not wanting to hurt her friend. She claimed that she had made peace with the situation and had no reason to harm Colette. Despite Angela's calm explanation, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that her knowledge of the affair might have led to resentment. They decided to look deeper into her actions leading up to the murder. Angela's phone records and her whereabouts on the night of August 13 were closely examined. Although Angela maintained her innocence, the investigators couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly came together, Angela remained a person of interest. Her connection to both Colette and the affair made her involvement in the case impossible to ignore. The police knew that they needed to keep pressing, hoping to uncover the truth about what really happened that night. On the morning of August 18, 2013, the investigation took a critical turn. It was a warm summer day in Lodi, with the temperature already climbing into the 80s by mid-morning. Detective Frank Marino and his team were continuing their work at the Jackson home, determined to find any overlooked clues. As the sun beat down on the quiet suburban neighborhood, Marino received a call from the forensic lab that would shift the direction of the case. The lab had completed an in-depth analysis of the blood found on the kitchen knife at the crime scene. Initially, the blood was assumed to belong solely to Colette, but the lab had discovered something unexpected, a small but distinct trace of another person's DNA mixed with the blood. Marino's heart raced as he listened to the results. The DNA belonged to Stephen Jackson. This finding was significant. It suggested that Stephen had been much closer to the crime than he had initially claimed. The presence of his DNA on the murder weapon raised serious questions about his involvement. Marino immediately contacted Stephen's lawyer to arrange a follow-up interview, but Stephen had gone into hiding, fueling the police's suspicions even further. Later that day, the police received another crucial piece of evidence. A neighbor who had been out of town during the initial investigation came forward with new information. The neighbor recalled seeing Stephen's car parked outside the Jackson home at around 2:00 a.m. on the night of the murder. This directly contradicted Stephen's earlier alibi that he had spent the night at his mother's house. With this new timeline in mind, Marino revisited the security footage from nearby homes. After hours of reviewing tapes, the team finally caught a glimpse of Stephen's car driving down the street at 1:45 a.m., just minutes before the neighbor spotted it parked at the house. This new evidence placed Stephen at the scene of the crime during the critical hours when Colette was murdered. Marino and his team felt a growing sense of urgency. The evidence was mounting against Stephen, but they knew they needed more to secure an arrest. They focused on tracking Stephen's movements after the crime, using his cell phone records to trace his location. The data showed that he had driven to a remote area outside of Lodi, where he stayed for several hours before returning home later that morning. This new evidence gave the police a much clearer picture of what had happened that night. Stephen's DNA on the knife, the neighbor's testimony, and the security footage all pointed to him being involved in Colette's death. The investigation was now centered on finding Stephen and bringing him in for questioning. On the evening of August 20, 2013, the Lodi police were closing in on their prime suspect, Stephen Jackson. The mounting evidence, including his DNA on the murder weapon, and the neighbor's testimony placing him at the scene, had made it clear that Stephen was involved in his wife Colette's brutal murder. As the sun began to set, Detective Frank Marino and his team prepared for the next step, Stephen's arrest. Stephen, a 40-year-old accountant, had always been seen as a quiet and dependable man. But behind his reserved exterior, he harbored dark secrets that would soon unravel. Stephen had been having a secret love affair with his best friend, Ernie Lagrima, for years. When Colette accidentally discovered the affair, she threatened to divorce him. Stephen, fearing the consequences, snapped. In a moment of panic and rage, he brutally slit her throat, leaving her to die in their home. To cover up his crime, Stephen bribed the medical examiner, who was also his drug dealer, to falsely rule Colette's death as natural due to her previous medical condition. The police, armed with an arrest warrant, arrived at Stephen's mother's house, where he had been hiding. It was around 7:00 p.m., and the neighborhood was quiet. As the officers approached the door, Stephen, sensing that his time was up, tried to flee through the back. But the police had anticipated this and quickly apprehended him. Stephen was handcuffed and led to a squad car, his face a mix of shock and resignation. He didn't resist. It was as if he knew the inevitable had finally caught up with him. Back at the station, Stephen was formally charged with the murder of his wife, Colette Jackson. The news of his arrests sent shockwaves through the Lodi community, especially among Colette's family and friends. They had known Stephen as a devoted husband, but the revelation of his affair and the brutal nature of the crime left them in disbelief. Colette's family, devastated by the loss and betrayal, expressed a mix of relief and sorrow. They were relieved that justice was being served, but the pain of losing Colette in such a horrific way was overwhelming. Stephen's arrest also deeply affected Ernie and Angela Lagrima. Ernie was in shock, unable to believe that his secret relationship had led to such a tragedy. Angela, who had urged Stephen to confess, was heartbroken but stood by her husband, believing that he had never intended for things to end this way. As Stephen was processed and led to his cell, Marino knew the case was far from over. The trial would be the next battle, and it was clear that this story was far from its conclusion. Stephen Jackson's trial began in January 2014, drawing significant attention from the local community and media. The courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers, all eager to see how the case would unfold. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Linda Caruso, 45, was determined to secure a conviction. Caruso was known for her fierce dedication to justice and had built a strong case against Stephen. She argued that Stephen had committed premeditated murder driven by fear and desperation after Colette discovered his affair with Ernie Lagrima. Caruso painted a picture of a man who would stop at nothing to keep his secret life hidden, even if it meant killing his wife. The defense, led by Stephen's attorney, Michael Friedman, 50, took a different approach. Friedman was a seasoned lawyer with a reputation for taking on challenging cases. He argued that Stephen's actions were not premeditated but the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. Friedman claimed that Stephen had acted in a fit of rage and panic, not with the intent to kill. He pointed to Stephen's clean criminal record and his role as a devoted husband and father, suggesting that this crime was out of character and not deserving of a harsh sentence. Throughout the trial, Colette's family sat in the front row, their emotions visible as they listened to the testimony. Her mother, Nancy, often wept quietly, while her father, Robert, stared straight ahead, his face a mask of grief. They had lost a daughter, and now they were witnessing the man who had taken her from them try to avoid full responsibility for his actions. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On February 15, 2014, they found Stephen Jackson guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Caruso, satisfied with the outcome, believed that justice had been served, although she had hoped for a first-degree conviction. During the sentencing, Stephen was given 25 years to life in prison. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Colette's family felt that it was not enough, believing that Stephen should have received a harsher punishment for the brutal way he had taken Colette's life. Ernie Lagrima, who had attended every day of the trial, looked devastated, knowing that their affair had led to such a tragic end. Angela, who had urged Stephen to confess, remained by her husband's side, but the toll of the trial and the sentencing was clear on her face. As Stephen was led away, the courtroom slowly emptied, leaving behind the echoes of a trial that had torn apart families and shaken a community. After Stephen Jackson's conviction, life changed dramatically for everyone involved. Colette's family tried to rebuild their lives, but the pain of losing her in such a violent way left a permanent scar. Her parents found solace in the support of friends and the community, but the loss of their daughter was a burden they would carry forever. They started a foundation in Colette's name, aimed at helping survivors of domestic violence, hoping to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Ernie Lagrima's life was also deeply affected. The affair that had once been his secret became public knowledge, and he faced harsh judgment from the community. Ernie, once a well-respected lawyer, found his reputation in ruins. He struggled to continue practicing law and eventually closed his practice, unable to escape the shadow of the trial. The guilt he felt over his role in the events that led to Colette's death was overwhelming. He withdrew from public life, spending most of his time in solitude, haunted by the choices he had made. Angela Lagrima, Ernie's wife, remained by his side, but their relationship was forever altered. Angela had been the one to encourage Stephen to confess, believing it was the right thing to do. However, the public scrutiny and the weight of the scandal strained their marriage. The couple moved away from Lodi, seeking a fresh start in a new town where they could leave the past behind. Despite the challenges, Angela remained committed to rebuilding their life together, though it was clear that the events had left a deep impact on both of them. Detective Frank Marino, who had led the investigation, continued his work with the Lodi Police Department. The case had been one of the most challenging of his career, and while he was proud of bringing Stephen to justice, the brutality of the crime and the pain it caused the families involved stayed with him. Marino became more vocal about the importance of mental health support for law enforcement officers, recognizing the toll that such cases could take on those tasked with solving them. Stephen Jackson, now serving his sentence in a state prison, adjusted to life behind bars. He spent much of his time in isolation, reflecting on the choices that had led him there. Stephen was a model prisoner, but the weight of his actions hung heavy on him. He occasionally received letters from Angela, who continued to check in on him, but he had little contact with the outside world. His life, once marked by a stable career and a seemingly happy marriage, was now defined by the walls of his cell and the knowledge that he had destroyed not only his life but the lives of those around him. Mike Muir was a 42-year-old man who lived in Riverside, California, a city known for its hot summers and beautiful orange groves. Mike was well known in his community. He was charismatic and outgoing, making friends easily wherever he went. Mike worked as a project manager at a local construction company and was respected by his colleagues for his dedication and hard work. He lived with his wife, Jackie, and their 10-year-old son, Bender. Mike was a loving father who always made time for his family. He enjoyed playing catch with Bender in their backyard and took him to soccer practice every weekend. Mike's wife, Jackie, ran a small home-based business, selling handmade crafts on Etsy. Mike loved golfing and often played at the Riverside Golf Club. He was also an avid TV watcher, with a particular love for classic sitcoms like Friends and Seinfeld. On weekends, you could find Mike participating in local charity events, often organizing fundraisers for causes like the American Cancer Society. In July 2018, Riverside was experiencing record heat. Despite the sweltering temperatures, Mike was in high spirits. He was excited about an upcoming business deal that promised to be a significant milestone in his career. He spent hours preparing presentations and meetings, hoping to secure a big contract for his company. Mike was also busy planning a family vacation to London. He had booked tickets for a tour of Buckingham Palace and a visit to the Harry Potter studio tour, knowing how much Bender loved the books and movies. The family had already started packing and discussing the places they wanted to visit. Mike looked forward to seeing the historic sites and spending quality time with his loved ones. Friends described Mike as kind-hearted and generous. He often helped neighbors with home repairs and volunteered at the local food bank. His friendly nature made him a beloved figure in the community. Mike dreamed of one day starting his own construction company and expanding his charitable work. He hoped to provide a better future for his family and make a lasting impact on his community. In the days leading up to his death, Mike's life seemed perfect. He had a loving family, a promising career, and exciting plans for the future. No one could have imagined the tragedy that was about to unfold. On the morning of July 12, 2018, at around 9 a.m., Tom Rogers, a close friend and neighbor of Mike Muir, made a shocking discovery. Tom had stopped by Mike's house for their regular morning coffee. It was something they did every Thursday before heading to work. Tom noticed that Mike hadn't responded to his usual text message that morning, which was unusual but not alarming. Tom walked up the driveway and knocked on the front door. When there was no answer, he tried the doorbell, but still, there was no response. Concerned, Tom decided to check if the back door was unlocked. As he walked around the house, he called out Mike's name but received no reply. When he reached the back door, he found it slightly ajar. Tom stepped inside and immediately sensed something was wrong. The house was eerily quiet. As he moved through the living room, he saw signs of a struggle, overturned furniture, and a broken vase on the floor. His heart began to race as he made his way towards the master bedroom. Upon entering the room, Tom was met with a horrifying sight. Mike Muir was lying on the floor, unresponsive, with severe bruises and injuries all over his body. He had been whipped to death with what appeared to be a woman's belt. The scene was gruesome, with clear signs of a violent altercation. Tom's hands shook as he dialed 911. The operator tried to keep him calm as he described what he had found. Tom's voice was shaky and filled with disbelief. He had never seen anything so violent and tragic. He stayed on the line, waiting for the police to arrive, unable to comprehend what had happened to his friend. Within minutes, sirens could be heard approaching. The police and paramedics arrived quickly. They found Tom standing outside, visibly shaken and in a state of shock. She guided him to a nearby bench and asked him to describe what he had seen. As Tom recounted the events, he struggled to hold back tears. He had known Mike for years, and the thought of his friend being brutally murdered was too much to bear. The paramedics confirmed that Mike was dead, and the police began securing the crime scene. The news of Mike's death spread quickly through the neighborhood. Friends and neighbors gathered outside, whispering in disbelief and mourning the loss of a beloved community member. The tragic discovery marked the beginning of a complex investigation into a case that would shock everyone who knew Mike Muir. When the police arrived at the Muir residence on July 12, 2018, they were quick and efficient. Detective Laura Martinez and her partner, Detective James Carter, led the investigation. Both were experienced officers known for their thoroughness and attention to detail. Detective Martinez, a methodical and calm investigator, quickly took charge, while Detective Carter, known for his sharp instincts, began assessing the scene. The crime scene was chaotic. The living room had overturned furniture, a broken vase, and other signs of a struggle. In the master bedroom, where Mike Muir's body was found, the scene was even more disturbing. Mike lay on the floor, his body covered in bruises and lash marks. He had been whipped to death with a woman's belt, which was found nearby. Blood was splattered on the walls and floor, indicating a violent and desperate struggle. Detective Martinez immediately began directing the team. She ordered the area to be cordoned off and assigned officers to interview neighbors and potential witnesses. Detective Carter focused on collecting evidence. He carefully bagged the belt and took samples of blood and hair from the scene. They also found several broken objects, suggesting a fierce altercation had taken place. The detectives called in a forensic team to assist with the investigation. The team used advanced tools to gather fingerprints, DNA samples, and other vital clues. They photographed the scene from multiple angles and meticulously documented every piece of evidence. The forensic team also used luminol to detect any hidden blood traces, revealing a clearer picture of the struggle that had occurred. As they worked, the detectives tried to piece together what had happened. They speculated that Mike had been attacked in the living room and had tried to defend himself, moving towards the bedroom in a desperate attempt to escape. The severity of his injuries suggested that his attacker was driven by intense rage. Neighbors provided valuable information. Many of them reported hearing loud arguments and crashing noises coming from the Mirror house the previous night. Some had even seen a shadowy figure leaving the house around midnight. Detective Martins made notes of these accounts, planning to follow up with more detailed interviews. The investigation was intense and painstaking. The detectives were determined to find out who had committed this brutal crime. They worked late into the night, reviewing the evidence and developing their theories. Every detail mattered, and they knew that solving this case required a careful and methodical approach. By the end of the day, Detective Martinez and Detective Carter had gathered significant evidence, but many questions remained. Who could have harbored such rage against Mike Muir? And why? These questions would drive their investigation as they sought to bring justice for Mike and his grieving family. Jackie Muir, Mike's 41-year-old wife, was the first person the police investigated. Jackie was well known in the community as a devoted wife and mother. She ran a small home-based business, selling handmade crafts on Etsy. People saw her as creative and dedicated. However, there were troubling signs beneath the surface. Friends and family had noticed that Jackie had become increasingly suspicious and paranoid about Mike's activities. She often believed Mike was cheating on her. This paranoia led to frequent and heated arguments. Neighbors reported hearing shouting matches late at night. Jackie's jealousy was intense. She would become hysterical as she even thought Mike had talked to another woman, throwing dishes and other objects in a fit of rage. Once, she even tried to whip Mike with her belt during a particularly fierce argument. The police brought Jackie in for questioning on the afternoon of July 12, 2018. Detective Laura Martins and Detective James Carter conducted the interrogation. Jackie appeared distraught and nervous. Her eyes were red from crying, and she fidgeted constantly. She denied any involvement in Mike's death, but her emotional state made the detectives suspicious. During the interrogation, Jackie's story was inconsistent. She claimed she had gone to bed early the previous night and didn't hear anything unusual. However, neighbors had reported hearing loud arguments coming from the Muir house. When confronted with this information, Jackie became defensive and agitated. She raised her voice and accused the detectives of trying to frame her. The detectives pressed further, asking Jackie about her relationship with Mike. Jackie admitted they had been having problems. She confessed to feeling increasingly jealous and angry, but insisted she loved Mike and would never harm him. Her answers were punctuated with outbursts of tears and frustration, making it difficult for the detectives to determine the truth. Jackie's possible motive was clear: her growing obsession with the idea that Mike was having an affair. The intense jealousy and frequent arguments pointed to a troubled marriage. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to confirm their suspicions. They decided to hold Jackie for further questioning and to conduct a thorough search of the house. Back at the Muir residence, the police searched for any additional clues. They found Jackie's diary hidden in a drawer. The diary revealed her deep-seated paranoia and documented her fears and suspicions about Mike's fidelity. It also contained detailed accounts of their arguments and her feelings of betrayal and rage. This new evidence painted a clearer picture of Jackie's state of mind and her potential motive for the crime. The detectives now had a strong lead, but they needed to continue their investigation to uncover the full truth. David Miller, a 38-year-old ambitious businessman, was the next person the police investigated. David worked in real estate and was known for his drive and determination. He had a competitive yet friendly relationship with Mike Muir. They often crossed paths in the business world and sometimes socialized together. There were rumors about the nature of their relationship, which added another layer of complexity to the case. The police brought David in for questioning on July 13, 2018. Detective Laura Martins and Detective James Carter led the interrogation. David appeared calm and composed, but there was a nervous tension beneath the surface. He cooperated fully with the detectives, answering their questions without hesitation. David admitted that he and Mike had a close relationship, both professionally and personally. He revealed that he had developed strong feelings for Mike over time. David confessed that he had created a secret love shrine in his home, filled with photos and mementos of Mike. He spoke openly about his unrequited love, claiming it was a deep admiration that never crossed into anything harmful. During the interrogation, David's emotions were evident. He spoke passionately about his feelings for Mike, but firmly denied any involvement in the murder. He stated that he had been at home the night of the murder, working on a new real estate deal. His alibi was supported by emails and phone records, which showed he had been in communication with clients and colleagues during the time of the crime. The detectives explored David's potential motive. While his unrequited love for Mike could have driven him to extreme actions, there was no evidence linking him directly to the crime. David's calm and cooperative demeanor contrasted sharply with Jackie's defensive and agitated responses, making it harder for the detectives to pin him as the perpetrator. David's business dealings were also scrutinized. He and Mike had competed for the same projects, leading to occasional tensions. However, colleagues described their rivalry as friendly and professional. There were no signs of any major conflicts that could have escalated into violence. Despite his clear feelings for Mike and the strange nature of the love shrine, there was no concrete evidence to implicate David in the murder. The detectives concluded that while David's relationship with Mike was unusual, it did not provide a sufficient motive for murder. They decided to keep him on their radar but turned their focus to other potential leads. David's interview added another layer to the investigation, revealing the complex relationships in Mike's life. The detectives continued to piece together the puzzle, knowing they were still far from uncovering the full truth behind Mike Muir's tragic death. On July 15, 2018, just after noon, the police received a crucial piece of new evidence. It was a scorching summer day, with temperatures reaching record highs in Riverside, California. Detective Laura Martinez and Detective James Carter were at the police station, reviewing the case files, when Officer Linda Hayes rushed in with an urgent report. A neighbor had found a set of torn clothing in her backyard. The clothes appeared to belong to a woman and were stained with what looked like blood. Detectives Martinez and Carter quickly went to the house to collect the evidence. The clothes included a torn blouse and a pair of jeans, both of which were covered in dirt and blood. The detectives carefully bagged the items and sent them to the forensic lab for analysis. They hoped the blood on the clothing would match Mike Muir's, providing a direct link to the murderer. Back at the station, the forensic team worked swiftly. They tested the blood samples and confirmed that they matched Mike's blood type. This finding strengthened the theory that the killer had discarded the clothes while fleeing the scene. The detectives also examined the clothes for any additional clues. They found a small label inside the blouse with the initials JM, which they believed stood for Jackie Muir. Detectives Martinez and Carter brought Jackie in for further questioning. When confronted with the new evidence, Jackie became visibly distressed. She denied that the clothes were hers and insisted she had no idea how they ended up in the neighbor's yard. Her nervous behavior and contradictory statements only heightened the detectives' suspicions. With this new evidence, the detectives felt they were getting closer to solving the case. But torn, blood-stained clothing provided a tangible link to Jackie, reinforcing their belief that she was involved in Mike's murder. They continued to gather information and build their case, determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Mike Muir. Sarah Jane Brines, a 34-year-old teacher, was the third suspect the police investigated. Sarah Jane was energetic and friendly, well-liked by her colleagues and students at Riverside Elementary School. She had known the Muir family because she taught their son, Bender. Despite her cheerful demeanor, Sarah Jane had a secret that complicated the case. Detectives Laura Martinez and James Carter brought Sarah Jane in for questioning on July 16, 2018. She appeared calm but nervous, twirling a strand of her hair as she sat down. When asked about her relationship with the Muirs, Sarah Jane revealed that she had been having an affair with Jackie Muir for over a year. Although the affair had ended a few months before Mike's murder, Sarah Jane admitted she still had lingering feelings for Jackie. Sarah Jane's possible motive stemmed from jealousy and unrequited love. She confessed that she felt hurt when Jackie ended their affair and suspected that Jackie might have been trying to rekindle her marriage with Mike. However, Sarah Jane insisted she had nothing to do with Mike's death. Her alibi for the night of the murder was that she was at home, grading papers, and watching The Great British Bake Off on Netflix, a popular watch for those with anxiety and other mental disorders. She provided the detectives with her laptop, which showed activity during the time of the murder supporting her alibi. The detectives found Sarah Jane's behavior during the interrogation to be mostly cooperative. She answered questions calmly but seemed genuinely sad when talking about her past relationship with Jackie. Detective Carter noticed a hint of bitterness when Sarah Jane spoke about Jackie's attempts to fix her marriage, but there were no signs of violent tendencies. To verify Sarah Jane's statements, the detectives interviewed her colleagues and neighbors. They all described Sarah Jane as kind and professional, with no history of aggressive behavior. Her alibi was further confirmed by a few neighbors who remembered seeing her car parked in her driveway all night on July 11. Despite her apparent innocence, the detectives couldn't ignore the complexity of her relationship with Jackie. They theorized that Sarah Jane might have been driven by jealousy or heartbreak, but there was no direct evidence linking her to the crime scene. With Sarah Jane's alibi holding up and no concrete evidence against her, the detectives decided to focus on other leads. They kept Sarah Jane on their radar but shifted their attention back to Jackie, who remained the primary suspect due to her inconsistent statements and the newly discovered evidence. Sarah Jane's interview added another layer of intrigue to the case, revealing the tangled relationships and emotions surrounding Mike Muir's tragic death. The detectives continued their investigation, determined to uncover the full truth. On July 18, 2018, the police made a breakthrough. They had gathered enough evidence to arrest Jackie Muir for the murder of her husband, Mike Muir. The combination of the bloody belt, the torn clothes with Jackie's initials, and her inconsistent statements pointed to her as the murderer. Detective Laura Martins and Detective James Carter arrived at the Muir residence early in the morning. They knocked on the door, and Jackie answered, looking tired and anxious. She seemed to sense what was coming. The detectives calmly informed her that she was under arrest for the murder of Mike Muir. Jackie's face turned pale, and she began to cry, insisting that she was innocent. However, she did not resist arrest. As the detectives placed Jackie in handcuffs, neighbors gathered outside, watching in shock. Jackie's reaction to her arrest was one of disbelief and despair. She repeatedly asked, "Why the bleep would I kill him?" But the evidence against her was overwhelming. The police escorted Jackie to the station, where she was booked and held in custody. At the police station, during further questioning, the detectives confronted Jackie with the hypocrisy of her situation. They pointed out that she was obsessed with the idea that Mike was having an affair, while she had been having an affair herself with Sarah Jane Bryans. Jackie's reaction was explosive. She became violent, throwing things from her purse at the officers, and even taking off her belt and trying to whip them with. The situation escalated to the point where Jackie had to be physically restrained and was charged for attacking a police officer. After that, the detectives reviewed the case with their team. They had pieced together the events leading up to Mike's murder. Jackie's growing obsession with the idea that Mike was cheating on her had driven her into a fit of rage. On the night of July 11, 2018, an argument had escalated into violence. Jackie had grabbed her belt and whipped Mike repeatedly. The struggle had moved from the living room to the bedroom, where Mike ultimately succumbed to his injuries. Jackie's motive was rooted in her intense jealousy and paranoia. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Mike to another woman, even though there was no evidence that he was unfaithful. Her irrational fears and uncontrolled anger had led her to commit a heinous act. When the detectives informed Mike's family of Jackie's arrest, they were devastated but also relieved that the truth was coming to light. Mike's parents expressed their sorrow over losing their son and their shock at learning that Jackie was responsible. They struggled to reconcile the image of Jackie as a loving wife and mother with the violent actions that had ended Mike's life. The community was equally stunned. Friends and neighbors who had known Jackie for years were in disbelief. They had seen her as a devoted wife, not capable of such violence. The arrest sent ripples through Riverside, with local news stations covering the story extensively. The police had successfully identified and arrested the murderer, but the case was far from over. Jackie would now face trial, where the evidence against her would be laid out in full. The detectives knew they had done their job, but the tragedy of Mike Muir's death continued to weigh heavily on everyone involved. Jackie Muir's trial began on September 10, 2018. The courtroom was packed with family, friends, and curious members of the Riverside community. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Samuel Brooks, aimed to prove that Jackie's jealousy and rage led her to murder her husband, Mike Muir. District Attorney Brooks, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough and meticulous, presented the evidence against Jackie. He highlighted the bloody belt found at the crime scene, the torn clothes with Jackie's initials, and the violent confrontation Jackie had with the police. Brooks argued that Jackie's obsession with the idea of Mike having an affair, combined with her own secret relationship with Sarah Jane Bryans, drove her to a deadly fit of rage. He detailed how the physical evidence and witness statements painted a clear picture of Jackie's guilt. Jackie's defense attorney, Maria Lopez, was a 38-year-old known for her compassionate yet fierce defense strategies. Lopez argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Jackie's actions were not premeditated but a result of a momentary lapse in judgment. She tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative by pointing out inconsistencies in the witness testimonies and suggesting alternative explanations for the physical evidence. Lopez emphasized Jackie's history as a loving mother and wife, arguing that the violent outburst was completely out of character. Throughout the trial, Mike Muir's family watched with heavy hearts. Richard and Susan Muir, along with other family members, found it difficult to sit through the details of Mike's death. Their emotional reactions were palpable, with tears often seen in their eyes as they listened to the testimony. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On September 20, 2018, they returned with a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Jackie showed little emotion, staring blankly ahead as she absorbed the news. Judge William Harris sentenced Jackie to 25 years to life in prison. He acknowledged the tragic circumstances but emphasized the need for justice and the severity of the crime. Jackie's sentencing brought some closure to Mike's family, though the pain of losing him remained. The community reacted with mixed feelings. Some believed the sentence was too harsh, given Jackie's prior good standing in the community. Others felt it was just, considering the brutality of the crime. Friends and neighbors of the Muir family expressed their continued support for Mike's family, attending the sentencing and offering their condolences. After Jackie Muir's trial, the lives of everyone involved changed significantly. Jackie was sent to the California Institution for Women to serve her sentence. She struggled to adjust to prison life, often reflecting on her actions and the impact they had on her family. Despite her circumstances, Jackie enrolled in counseling and educational programs, hoping to understand her behavior and seek some form of redemption. Mike Muir's family faced a difficult journey of healing. Richard and Susan Muir, Mike's parents, took on the responsibility of raising Bender, Mike, and Jackie's son. They worked hard to provide him with a stable home environment. Bender, who was only 10 at the time, struggled with the loss of his father and the imprisonment of his mother. His grandparents enrolled him in therapy to help him cope with the trauma. Sarah Jane Bryans, the third suspect in the case, returned to her teaching job at Riverside Elementary School. Though cleared of any wrongdoing, the trial left a mark on her reputation. She focused on rebuilding her life and maintaining a low profile, dedicating herself to her students and avoiding the media spotlight. Her relationship with Jackie remained a topic of speculation, but Sarah Jane chose not to discuss it publicly. David Miller, the second suspect, continued his career in real estate. He maintained a professional demeanor but found it challenging to escape the shadow of the trial. The rumors about his relationship with Mike Muir persisted, but David chose to focus on his work, distancing himself from the past as much as possible. Life after the trial was a period of adjustment and reflection for everyone involved. The tragedy of Mike Muir's death left a lasting impact, but the resilience and support of the community helped those affected find a path forward. Our story begins with Dave Markerson, a 58-year-old financial analyst living in Fishers, Indiana. Dave was a hardworking man known for his smart mind and calm demeanor. He lived with his second wife, Vivi, and had 2 adult children from his first marriage, Jason and Lana. Dave was well respected in his community and had a stable job that he loved. Dave graduated from Indiana University with a degree in finance. He had a successful career working for a well-known financial firm in Indianapolis. Despite his busy work schedule, Dave always made time for his family. He enjoyed playing chess with his friends at the local chess club and reading mystery novels by authors like Agatha Christie and Arthur Conan Doyle. His favorite book was The Hound of the Baskervilles. Dave's personality was warm and kind. He was always there to help his friends and family. His children, Jason and Lana, loved him dearly. Jason, 25, was trying to find his way in the world and had a complicated relationship with his father. Lana, 24, admired her father and often saw his advice for her event-planning business. In the days before his death, Dave was excited about the upcoming Christmas holiday. He looked forward to spending time with his family and had already bought gifts for everyone. Dave's favorite part of the holiday season was decorating the Christmas tree and watching classic Christmas movies like It's a Wonderful Life and Die Hard. He enjoyed the festive atmosphere and loved seeing the joy on his family's faces. On December 20, 2007, Dave was planning to attend a Christmas party of his office. He was in good spirits and had even picked out a special tie with Santa Claus on it. Dave's last few days were filled with joy and anticipation as he made plans to celebrate Christmas with his loved ones. Dave's friends and colleagues remember him as a dedicated and generous person. His sudden death shocked everyone who knew him. The news of his passing was covered by the local media, and many people in the community mourned his loss. Dave's life seemed perfect on the outside, but he was unaware of the dark secrets that would soon come to light. On the morning of December 21, 2007, it was a cold and cloudy day in Fishers, Indiana. Snowflakes gently fell from the sky, covering the ground in the light dusting of white. Inside the Marcherson home, the Christmas decorations sparkled with festive lights, and a soft holiday tune played on the radio. Lana Marcherson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter, woke up early. She planned to finish some work for her event-planning business before meeting a friend for lunch at the local Applebee's. As she walked down the stairs, she noticed that her father, Dave, wasn't up yet. It was unusual because Dave was always an early riser. Concerned, Lana went to the living room, where she found her father lying on the couch. At first, she thought he was asleep. She called out to him softly, "Dad, it's time to wake up." But Dave didn't move. Lana approached him and gently shook his shoulder. When he still didn't respond, she noticed his skin was cold to the touch. Panic began to set in. Lana's heart raced as she checked for a pulse, but there was none. Overwhelmed with fear and confusion, she called 911. "My dad is not breathing. I think he's dead," she cried, her voice trembling. The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way. Within minutes, emergency responders arrived at the scene. The paramedics confirmed that Dave was dead. Lana was in shock and disbelief, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't understand how her father, who had been healthy and happy just the day before, could be gone. Detective Billy Pestian, a seasoned investigator with the Fishers Police Department, was called to the scene. He observed the living room, noting the cozy, festive setting. Dave's body was lying peacefully on the couch with no visible signs of trauma. At first glance, it appeared to be a natural death. The news of Dave's sudden passing quickly spread through the community. Friends and neighbors gathered outside the Marcherson home, whispering in hushed tones. The local news station, WTHR Channel 13, reported on Dave's death, highlighting his contributions to the community and his loving family. Lana's discovery of her father's body was a heartbreaking moment that left her in a state of shock. She couldn't comprehend the loss and kept replaying the events in her mind. The once joyful holiday season had turned into a time of mourning and sorrow for the Marcherson family. On December 21, 2007, Detective Billy Pestian arrived promptly at the Marcherson home after receiving the emergency call. It was a cold and cloudy morning, with a light dusting of snow on the ground. Detective Pestian was known for his meticulous attention to detail and calm demeanor. The living room was decorated with festive Christmas lights and a beautifully adorned tree. The scene seemed peaceful, but Detective Pestian sensed something was off. Dave Marcherson's body lay on the couch, appearing as if he had peacefully fallen asleep. There were no signs of a struggle or any visible injuries. The first responders were already there, and the paramedics had confirmed Dave's death. Detective Pestian began his investigation by carefully examining the room. He noticed a teacup on the coffee table next to Dave, which seemed out of place given the circumstances. He instructed the forensic team to collect the teacup and any other potential evidence for further analysis. Detective Pestian then turned his attention to Lana, who was still in shock and being comforted by a neighbor. He gently asked her about the events leading up to the discovery of her father's body. Lana explained that she had found him that morning and immediately called 911. She mentioned that Dave had seemed perfectly fine the night before and had even been looking forward to the office Christmas party. As the investigation continued, Detective Pestian called in the coroner to conduct a preliminary examination of Dave's body. The coroner, Dr. Susan Mancoro, was an experienced professional known for her thoroughness. She noted that while there were no external injuries, Dave's skin had an unusual discoloration. Dr. Taylor suspected poisoning and took samples for toxicology testing. As the day progressed, Detective Pestian received a call from the lab. The preliminary toxicology report indicated the presence of a rare toxin in Dave's system, confirming Dr. Mancoro's suspicion. This discovery changed the course of the investigation, turning it from a potential natural death to a suspected homicide. The first suspect in the case was Vivi Marcherson Greaves, Dave's 19-year-old second wife. Vivi was known for her charm and sociable nature. She worked as an event planner and was well-liked in her community. Vivi often organized memorable events and was known for her attention to detail. However, beneath her friendly exterior, Vivi had a complicated personal life. Detective Billy Pestian and his team arrived at Vivi's office, a local event planning business in Fishers, Indiana. The office was decorated for the holidays with bright lights and festive decorations. Vivi greeted them with a warm smile, but the detectives noticed a hint of nervousness in her eyes. They asked her to come to the station for questioning. At the police station, Detective Pestian began the interrogation. Vivi seemed calm but cautious. She explained that she had spent the previous evening at home with Dave, watching Hallmark movies and enjoying a quiet night in. When asked about her relationship with Dave, Vivi described it as loving and supportive. However, Detective Pestian pressed further, mentioning rumors of an affair between Vivi and her stepson, Jason. Vivi's demeanor changed slightly. She denied any romantic involvement with Jason, insisting they were just close due to their shared love for event planning. Despite her calm exterior, Vivi's answers were often vague and evasive. The detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence. As the questioning continued, Detective Pestian asked Vivi about the teacup found next to Dave's body. Vivi hesitated before explaining that it was part of their nightly routine for Dave to drink tea before bed. She insisted that she had no idea how the toxin could have gotten into the tea. Her answers seemed rehearsed, and Detective Pestian noted her increasing nervousness. The motive for Vivi was becoming clearer. If she was indeed having an affair with Jason, Dave's death could free her from a loveless marriage and allow her to be with Jason openly. The detectives also discovered financial records showing that Dave had a substantial life insurance policy, with Vivi as the beneficiary. Despite Vivi's calm demeanor, her vague answers and potential motives made her a prime suspect. Detective Pestian knew they needed more evidence to either confirm or rule out her involvement in Dave's death. The investigation into Vivi Markerson-Greeds was just beginning, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth behind the murder. As the detectives continued their investigation, they knew they had to dig deeper into Vivi's personal life and her relationship with Jason. The next steps would involve interviewing more people and looking for any inconsistencies in Vivi's story. But truth was out there, and Detective Pestian and his team were committed to finding it. The second suspect in the case was Jason Marcherson, Dave's 25-year-old son. Jason was known for his sharp mind and resourcefulness. He had a complicated relationship with his father and had spent some time in a mental facility. Jason had recently developed a romantic relationship with his stepmother, Vivi, which made him a prime suspect. Detective Billy Pestian and his team arrived at Jason's apartment in downtown Indianapolis. Jason greeted them with a wary look, aware of the gravity of the situation. The detectives asked him to come to the station for questioning. At the police station, Detective Pestian began the interrogation. Jason seemed calm but guarded. He explained that he had been at his apartment the night before Dave's death, working on a project. When asked about his relationship with his father, Jason admitted that they had their differences but insisted that he would never harm him. Detective Pestian then brought up the rumors of Jason's affair with Vivi. Jason's calm demeanor faltered slightly. He admitted to having feelings for Vivi, but denied any involvement in Dave's death. He claimed that their relationship was consensual and that they had planned to talk to Dave about it after the holidays. The detectives pressed further, asking Jason about his recent financial troubles. Jason revealed that he had been struggling with an addiction to marijuana and had been borrowing money from his father to support his habit. He also admitted that he had been blackmailing Vivi for money, threatening to expose their affair if she didn't pay him. The motive for Jason was becoming clearer. If Dave were out of the picture, Jason could potentially gain access to more money and continue his relationship with Vivi without fear of exposure. The detectives also discovered that Jason had recently purchased a large quantity of the rare toxin found in Dave's system. Despite his calm exterior, Jason's admissions and potential motives made him a prime suspect. Detective Pestian knew they needed more evidence to either confirm or rule out his involvement in Dave's death. The investigation into Jason Marcherson was just beginning, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. As the detectives continued their investigation, they knew they had to dig deeper into Jason's personal life and his relationship with Vivi. The next steps would involve interviewing more people and looking for any inconsistencies in Jason's story. The truth was out there, and Detective Pestian and his team were committed to finding it. The detectives left no stone unturned, ensuring that every detail was examined and every lead followed. They were determined to bring justice for Dave Marcherson and uncover the true story behind his tragic death. On December 23, 2007, just 2 days before Christmas, the weather in Fishers, Indiana, was cold and overcast. Detective Billy Pestian received a call that would change the course of the investigation. New evidence had been found in Dave Marcherson's home. The discovery provided a crucial breakthrough in the case. Earlier that morning, a neighbor had noticed something unusual while walking her dog. She saw an envelope sticking out from under a flower pot on the Marchersons' porch. Curious, she picked it up and saw that it was addressed to Detective Pestian. The neighbor immediately called the police, and Detective Pestian rushed to the scene. The envelope contained a letter and a small vial. The letter was unsigned but provided detailed information about the rare toxin found in Dave's system. The writer claimed to know who the killer was and provided specific details about how the toxin had been acquired and used. The letter also mentioned a hidden stash of documents in the Marchersons' attic that would reveal the true motive behind the murder. Detective Pestian and his team quickly obtained a warrant to search the attic. Inside, they found a lockbox. Using tools to carefully open it, they discovered several important documents, including financial records, personal letters, and a detailed plan outlining how the murder was to be carried out. The documents pointed to a well-planned conspiracy. Among the papers was a receipt for the purchase of the rare toxin, dated 2 months before Dave's death. The name on the receipt was Lana Marcherson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter. The detectives were shocked by this revelation, as Lana had not been a primary suspect up until this point. The new evidence painted a different picture of the crime. Detective Pestian and his team reviewed the documents thoroughly, uncovering Lana's hidden motives. The letters revealed her deep jealousy over Jason's relationship with Vivi and her desire to remove her father from the picture to gain control over the family's finances and the event planning business she co-owned with Vivi. The police responded to this new evidence by calling Lana in for further questioning. When confronted with the documents, Lana's demeanor changed from cooperative to defensive. She denied any involvement at first, but eventually broke down under pressure, revealing the extent of her involvement in the plot. Detective Pestian knew they were getting closer to solving the case. The new evidence provided a clear motive and linked Lana directly to the crime. The police continued to gather more information, determined to bring justice to Dave Marcherson's tragic death. The third suspect in the case was Lana Marcherson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter. Lana was a pragmatic and ambitious young woman who co-owned an event planning business with Vivi. She was known for her hard work and dedication, and she was fiercely loyal to Vivi. However, her jealousy and complex emotions added a layer of intrigue to the case. On December 24, 2007, Detective Billy Pestian and his team called Lana in for further questioning. It was Christmas Eve, and the weather outside was cold with a light snow falling. The festive decorations at the police station stood in stark contrast to the serious atmosphere of the interrogation room. Lana arrived at the station, visibly nervous but trying to maintain her composure. Detective Pestian began the interrogation by asking Lana about her relationship with her father. Lana described her father as loving and supportive, but admitted they have their differences, especially regarding the family business and her personal life. When Detective Pestian brought up the newly discovered documents, Lana's demeanor shifted. She became defensive, denying any involvement in her father's death. However, the detectives presented her with the receipt for the rare toxin, which bore her name. The evidence was overwhelming, and Lana's story began to unravel. Lana eventually confessed to her part in the plot. She admitted to feeling jealous of her brother Jason's relationship with Vivi and her father's control over the family's finances. Lana saw an opportunity to gain control over the business and her father's estate by eliminating it. She had supplied Vivi with the rare toxin, encouraging her to use it to poison Dave. The detectives were stunned by Lana's cold and calculated confession. She revealed how she had manipulated both Vivi and Jason to achieve her goals. Her jealousy and ambition had driven her to commit a heinous crime, betraying her own family in the process. Lana's motive became clear. She wanted to remove her father from the picture to gain financial control and to keep Vivi for herself. Her unrequited love for Vivi and jealousy of Jason's relationship with her fueled her actions. Lana's confession provided the final piece of the puzzle, linking her directly to the crime and revealing her as the true mastermind behind the murder. Detective Pestian and his team were now confident they had uncovered the full extent of the plot. Lana's detailed confession, along with the physical evidence, provided a clear picture of her involvement. The investigation into Lana Marcherson revealed a chilling tale of jealousy, manipulation, and betrayal, bringing them closer to solving the tragic case. On December 25, 2007, the weather in Fishers, Indiana, was cold and snowy. It was Christmas morning, and the town was quiet. Detective Billy Pestian and his team had gathered enough evidence to identify the murderer. The killer was Vivi Marcherson, Dave's 19-year-old wife. Her motives were a mix of desperation to escape her loveless marriage and a desire to be with her stepson, Jason. Vivi's plan was meticulously crafted. She had purchased a rare toxin with the help of Lana, Dave's daughter. Vivi then mixed the poison into Dave's favorite evening tea. The poison caused a slow and painful death, which initially appeared natural due to its subtle symptoms. Vivi thought she had planned the perfect crime, but the evidence told a different story. Detective Pestian reviewed the evidence one last time before heading to the Marcherson home to make the arrest. Vivi had become the primary suspect after Lana's confession. The detailed plan found in the attic, the toxicology report, and the receipt for the rare toxin all pointed to Vivi's involvement. The detectives were ready to bring her to justice. As Detective Pestian and his team approached the Marcherson home, they saw the festive Christmas lights twinkling. Despite the holiday cheer, the atmosphere was tense. The detectives knocked on the door, and Vivi answered, her face showing a mix of surprise and fear. "Vivi Marcherson, you are under arrest for the murder of Dave Marcherson," Detective Pestian announced. Vivi was shocked, but quickly composed herself. She was handcuffed and led to the police car, her neighbors watching in disbelief. At the police station, Vivi was questioned again. This time, with all the evidence laid out before her, she broke down and confessed. She admitted to poisoning Dave to be with Jason and escape her unhappy marriage. She also revealed that Jason had been blackmailing her for money to support his drug addiction. Feeling trapped and betrayed, Vivi had hoped that confessing might bring her some leniency. The reaction from Dave's family was a mix of relief and sorrow. His children, Jason and Lana, were devastated by the betrayal and loss. The neighbors and friends who had known the Marchersons were shocked to learn the truth. The small town of Fishers, Indiana, was rocked by the news of the murder and the dark secrets that had come to light. Vivi's arrest brought a sense of closure to the investigation. Detective Pestian and his team had worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. The case was a stark reminder of how jealousy and desperation could lead to tragic consequences. As Vivi was taken away, the town began to heal, knowing that justice had been served. The trial of Vivi Marcherson began on February 10, 2008, in Fishers, Indiana. The courtroom was filled with reporters, family members, and curious locals. The weather was cold and snowy, reflecting the somber mood inside. The prosecutor, Malia Jacobs-Chan, a 45-year-old seasoned attorney known for her determination and sharp wit, presented the case against Vivi. Malia Jacobs-Chan laid out the evidence methodically, explaining how Vivi had purchased the rare toxin with the help of Lana and used it to poison her husband, Dave. She described the financial and romantic motives, highlighting Vivi's desperation to escape her marriage and be with Jason. Jacobs called several witnesses, including Detective Billy Pestian, who detailed the investigation and the evidence found. The defense attorney, Mickey Mouse Brown, a 50-year-old with a reputation for defending tough cases, argued that Vivi was coerced by Jason and Lana. He painted Vivi as a victim of manipulation, desperate and frightened. Brown tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's timeline and motives, suggesting that Jason and Lana were the real masterminds. The courtroom was tense as the trial unfolded. Dave's family sat in the front row, their faces a mix of sadness and anger. They listened intently as both sides presented their arguments. The jury was visibly affected by the emotional testimonies and the detailed evidence. After several days of deliberation, the jury found Vivi Marcherson guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was announced on February 20, 2008. Vivi showed little emotion as the verdict was read, but her pale face and trembling hands revealed her fear. The judge sentenced Vivi to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought a sense of justice to Dave's family, though the pain of losing him remained. The impact of the trial and verdict rippled through the community. Dave's children, Jason and Lana, were deeply affected. Jason, already struggling with his drug addiction, found it hard to cope with the guilt and shame. Lana, despite her involvement, expressed remorse and cooperated with the authorities, which resulted in a lesser charge and a reduced sentence. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Marcherson family. The small town of Fishers, Indiana, was left to grapple with the shocking events and the dark secrets that had come to light. The case was widely covered in the media, with news outlets and local stations providing extensive coverage of the trial and its aftermath. In the end, justice was served, but the scars left behind would take a long time to heal. The Marterson family and the community of Fishers would forever remember the dark love triangle that led to Dave's tragic death. After the trial, life in Fishers, Indiana, slowly began to return to normal. However, for the Marterson family, the aftermath of the murder left deep scars. Dave Markerson's death and the trial of his wife, Vivi, had changed their lives forever. Jason Markerson, Dave's 25-year-old son, struggled the most. His drug addiction had worsened during the trial, and he had a hard time dealing with the guilt and shame of his involvement with Vivi. He checked into a rehabilitation center in Indianapolis, hoping to overcome his addiction and start anew. The path to recovery was long and challenging, but Jason was determined to turn his life around. Lana Markerson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter, faced her own set of challenges. Her role in the murder and the manipulation of Vivi had been exposed during the trial. Despite her cooperation with the authorities, she received a reduced sentence of 5 years in prison. Lana expressed deep remorse for her actions and planned to use her time in prison to reflect and rehabilitate. Vivi Markerson, now serving a like sentence, adapted to life behind bars. She spent her days reflecting on the choices that led to her imprisonment. Vivi joined a prison program that focused on education and personal growth. While she would never leave prison, she hoped to find some form of redemption. The town of Fishers, Indiana, slowly healed from the tragedy. The residents, who had been shocked by the events, came together to support one another. Community events and gatherings helped restore a sense of normalcy and unity. In the end, the tragic events surrounding Dave Markerson's death served as a stark reminder of the consequences of jealousy, betrayal, and desperation. The case had left a lasting impact on all those involved, but it also highlighted the importance of justice, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit. Bobby Nurtek, aged 52, was an ambitious and driven real estate developer. Known for his charismatic personality and charming demeanor, he built a successful career constructing McMansions in the desert north of Los Angeles. Bobby's life was filled with contradictions. On one hand, he was a successful businessman, admired by many for his achievements. On the other hand, he was a lonely soul, seeking solace in the vast desert landscape that surrounded his property. Despite his many professional accomplishments, Bobby's personal life was marked by tumultuous relationships and betrayals. Living like a recluse in his multi-million-dollar ranch, Bobby yearned for stability and genuine connections. He often sought solace in the vast expanse of the Mojave Desert, finding peace in the solitude it offered. His sprawling estate, nestled amidst the arid landscape, was a testament to his wealth and influence. In November of 2002, Bobby's life took a tragic turn. Rumors swirled in the tight-knit community of Lancaster, with whispers of infidelity, financial troubles, and resentful business partners. Bobby's relationships were a constant source of turmoil. He and his ex-wife, Eliza, had just finished their bitter divorce proceedings. The local newspaper, the Lancaster Gazette, published a series of articles highlighting his rise to prominence and the controversies that surrounded him. We will dive deeper into the events leading up to Bobby's murder, exploring the motives and suspects involved. Stay tuned as we uncover the truth behind this tragic crime. On a fateful day in November 2002, tragedy struck the quiet town of Lancaster, California. The lifeless body of Bobby Nurtek, a prominent real estate developer, was found in the stable of his multi-million-dollar ranch. The news of his untimely demise sent shockwaves through the community, leaving friends and family in a state of disbelief. The discovery of Bobby Nurtek's body was made by his close friend, Jason Harris Packard, who had come to visit him at his sprawling ranch. As Jason entered the stable, he was met with a scene of horror. Bobby lay motionless on the ground, a single bullet wound piercing his heart. The silence that filled the air was deafening, as if the world had come to a standstill. Immediately overcome with grief, Jason frantically dialed 911, desperately hoping that help would arrive in time. The authorities were alerted, and within minutes, the tranquil ranch was transformed into a crime scene. Police cars lined the driveway, their flashing lights illuminating the darkness that had descended upon the once serene landscape. News of the murder quickly spread, capturing the attention of the local media. Television crews from KTLA and KCBS set up their cameras, reporting live from the scene. As investigators meticulously combed through the evidence, the community was left grappling with shock and fear. How could such a tragedy befall someone like Bobby Nurtek, a man who had seemingly achieved the American dream? Rumors and speculation ran rampant as whispers of jealousy, greed, and betrayal filled the air. The days that followed were filled with interviews, interrogations, and painstaking analysis of every piece of evidence. The police were determined to bring the perpetrator to justice, to provide closure for Bobby's loved ones, and restore a sense of security to the community. In the aftermath of the shocking murder of Bobby Nurtek, the police wasted no time in their pursuit of justice. Led by the determined Detective Laura Cordobiutica, the investigation team arrived at the crime scene with a sense of urgency. The once pristine and sprawling ranch, nestled in the desert north of Los Angeles, now stood as a haunting backdrop to the heinous crime that had taken place. As the investigators entered the property, they were met with a scene of devastation and despair. Bloodstains, like dark and ominous brushstrokes, painted a grim picture of the violence that had unfolded. Each droplet of blood told a story of the struggle that Bobby Nurtek had endured in his final moments. The investigators meticulously documented every detail, ensuring that no piece of evidence went unnoticed. The police team methodically combed through the ranch, searching for any clues that could lead them to the identity of the killer. They carefully examined every room, every nook and cranny, in their quest for the truth. The air was thick with tension as they meticulously collected fingerprints, DNA samples, and any other potential evidence that could help solve the case. Outside the ranch, the investigators discovered a gun in a nearby gully. The weapon, a cold and deadly instrument, held the key to unlocking the mystery behind Bobby Nurtek's untimely demise. It was carefully bagged and tagged, ready to be sent to the forensic lab for analysis. As the investigation unfolded, the police reached out to the media for assistance. News outlets, such as the local Lancaster Gazette and the Los Angeles Times, reported on the case, urging anyone with information to come forward. The community was gripped with fear and curiosity, eager to see justice served for the beloved real estate developer. The investigation into the murder of Bobby Nurtek took a dramatic turn when the focus shifted to his ex-wife, Eliza Nurtek. Eliza, age 38, was a marketing consultant in the San Fernando Valley and had a history of manipulative behavior. The police, armed with this information, began to dig deeper into her life, hoping to uncover any potential motive for the heinous crime. Eliza and Bobby's marriage was far from picture perfect. Their tumultuous, decade-long relationship was marred by accusations of infidelity and betrayal. Bobby had claimed that Eliza had cheated on him numerous times, leaving him feeling hurt and betrayed. These allegations were further compounded by Eliza's manipulative nature, which Bobby had often pointed out. The police believed that these factors could have driven Eliza to commit such a heinous act. Detective Laura Cordobiutica, the lead investigator on the case, wasted no time in interrogating Eliza. The questioning took place in a small, dimly lit room, with the tension palpable in the air. Eliza, dressed in a stylish pantsuit, maintained her composure as she vehemently denied any involvement in Bobby's murder. In an unexpected twist, Eliza retaliated by accusing Bobby of infidelity. She claimed that he had cheated on her multiple times with both men and women. These accusations added fuel to the already intense investigation, as the police now had to consider the possibility of a crime of passion. The media quickly caught wind of this sensational revelation, and blog posts by true crime fanatics began to speculate on the motives behind the murder. As the investigation continued, the police delved into Eliza's background. They discovered that she had a penchant for manipulation and had a reputation for being cunning. Eliza's clients, who had worked with her in the past, spoke of her ability to twist situations to her advantage and manipulate those around her. These insights into Eliza's character only deepened the suspicion surrounding her involvement in Bobby's murder. The investigation into the murder of Bobby Nurtek was far from over, and the police were determined to uncover the truth. As they sifted through the evidence and interviewed witnesses, they hoped to find the missing pieces that would lead them to the killer. The investigation into the murder of Bobby Nurtek took an unexpected turn when the police turned their attention to Jason Harris Packard, Bobby's business partner and close friend. Jason, aged 48, was known for his ambitious nature and ruthless approach to business. He and Bobby had a complicated relationship marked by both friendship and conflict. Jason's involvement in the murder investigation raised eyebrows due to his proximity to the victim. Rumors circulated that they were not only business partners, but also had a close personal relationship, so close that they even slept together in the same bed. Speculations about their alleged sexual involvement added another layer of complexity to the case. The police interrogated Jason, hoping to uncover any possible motive for his involvement in the crime. They questioned him about his financial disputes with Bobby and the nature of their relationship. Jason, torn between grief and suspicion, vehemently denied any participation in a sexual relationship with Bobby or in the murder. To gather more information, the investigators delved into Jason's background. They discovered that he had a reputation for being cutthroat in his business dealings, always striving for financial success. They also found evidence of previous clashes between Jason and Bobby over financial matters, further fueling their suspicions. The police meticulously examined Jason's alibi for the night of the murder. They interviewed his friends, colleagues, and neighbors, trying to establish his whereabouts. They searched for any inconsistencies or witnesses who could provide crucial information. Despite the mounting evidence against Jason, the investigation remained ongoing. The police were determined to leave no stone unturned in their pursuit of the truth. They continued to gather witness statements, analyze forensic evidence, and explore alternative theories. In the riveting investigation into the murder of Bobby Nurtek, shocking revelations have come to light that expose a web of deceit and corruption. As the police delved deeper into his life, they uncovered a sinister truth about his real estate dealings and the subpar materials used in his McMansions. These revelations have sent shockwaves through the community of Lancaster, California, where the tragic events unfolded in November of 2002. During the investigation, a devastating incident occurred that shed light on the true nature of Bobby Nurtek's real estate empire. The McPherson family, residents of one of the subdivisions he built, tragically lost their lives when the walls of their home collapsed while they slept. This horrifying event prompted the police to dig deeper into Bobby's business practices and construction methods. It was soon revealed that Bobby's real estate dealings were far from legitimate. The investigation uncovered a trail of dirty money flowing through his business transactions, raising suspicions of money laundering. This shocking revelation left the community in disbelief, as Bobby had been seen as a successful and respected figure in the world of real estate. Furthermore, it was discovered that the McMansions Bobby constructed were built using substandard materials. The investigation revealed that corners had been cut, compromising the safety and integrity of these homes. The use of inferior materials put the lives of the residents at risk, as evidenced by the tragic fate of the McPherson family. The community was left reeling from the realization that their dream homes were built on a foundation of deception. As news of these revelations spread, media outlets picked up the story, further amplifying the shock and outrage. Headlines blared with phrases like "Real estate tycoon's dark secrets exposed" and "Lancaster scandal rocks community." The scandal surrounding Bobby Nurtek's murder had transformed into a larger narrative of corruption and betrayal. The police, faced with this new evidence, expanded their investigation to include not only the murder, but also the financial crimes and building code violations committed by Bobby Nurtek. The community demanded justice for the lives lost and the deception that had been perpetrated on them. The investigation took an unexpected turn when the police uncovered the lifeless body of Lucy Colligard, Bobby Nurtek's girlfriend, in her small apartment in Lancaster, California. Lucy, a struggling actress with dreams of making it big in Hollywood, had a troubled past filled with failed relationships and a history of substance abuse. The police, led by Detective Laura Cordobiutica, immediately began piecing together the events leading up to Lucy's death. They meticulously combed through her apartment, searching for any clues that could shed light on what happened. The walls were adorned with posters of famous actors and actresses, a testament to Lucy's aspirations. In her bedroom, they found an open bottle of prescription pills and empty beer cans scattered on the floor. It was clear that Lucy had been struggling with her demons, seeking solace in substances that ultimately led to her demise. As the investigation continued, the police interviewed Lucy's friends and acquaintances, trying to unravel the complex web of relationships in her life. One friend, Delia Masterson, a fellow struggling actress, recalled a conversation she had with Lucy just days before her death. Lucy had confided in Delia about her tumultuous relationship with Bobby Nurtek, expressing her frustration and unhappiness. Delia mentioned that Lucy had been receiving threatening messages from an unknown person, adding to her already fragile state of mind. The police obtained Lucy's phone records and discovered a series of text messages from an unknown number. The messages were filled with threats and insults, further adding to the mystery surrounding her death. Detective Cordoba Utica reached out to the phone company, hoping to trace the origin of the messages. As the investigation into Lucy Colligard's death continued, the police were faced with a myriad of possibilities. Was Lucy's death the result of her own demons and struggles with substance abuse? Or was there someone else involved, someone who had a motive to silence her forever? Only time would tell as Detective Cordoba Utica and her team worked tirelessly to uncover the truth behind this tragic event. After weeks of tireless investigation, the truth behind the murder of Bobby Nurtek finally came to light. It was Eliza Nurtek, Bobby's ex-wife, who orchestrated a chilling plot to eliminate him and his allies. Motivated by a deep-seated anger and resentment towards Bobby, Eliza meticulously planned a murder that would ensure he paid for his past transgressions. The police, led by Detective Laura Cordoba Utica, painstakingly pieced together the puzzle that revealed Eliza's sinister intentions. Through extensive interviews, forensic analysis, and the examination of various pieces of evidence, they were able to uncover the truth. Eliza's motive for the murder stemmed from Bobby's infidelity and betrayal during their tumultuous, decade-long marriage. She harbored a deep-seated anger towards him, feeling that he had cheated on her multiple times with both men and women. This betrayal fueled her desire for revenge, leading her down a dark and dangerous path. To carry out her plan, Eliza meticulously planned the murder, leaving no detail to chance. She carefully selected the murder weapon, a gun, and executed the crime with cold precision. After shooting Bobby, she staged the crime scene to make it appear as if someone else was responsible. But that was not all. She also murdered his girlfriend, Lucy Colligard, and then planted evidence to make it look like she had died from an overdose. The police, however, were not easily deceived. Through their diligent investigation, they uncovered inconsistencies in Eliza's alibi and discovered the true nature of her relationship with Bobby. They also found evidence linking her to the murder weapon in the staged crime scene. Eliza's web of lies began to unravel, and the truth slowly emerged. On a fateful day in December of 2002, just before Christmas, the police moved swiftly to apprehend Eliza. They arrested her, leaving her shocked and surprised by the swift hand of justice. The community, once gripped by fear and uncertainty, could finally breathe a sigh of relief knowing that the person responsible for these heinous crimes was behind bars. In the aftermath of this tragic event, the community of Lancaster, California was left reeling. The shocking nature of the crimes and the betrayal of trust had a profound impact on the residents. The media frenzy surrounding the case only added to the sense of unease and disbelief. The trial of Eliza Nurtek, the prime suspect in the murder of Bobby Nurtek and Lucy Colligard, was a riveting spectacle. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution and defense presented their cases, each side vying for justice to be served. Prosecutor A.E. Shin Choi, a seasoned legal expert, meticulously built a compelling case against Eliza. With a firm voice and unwavering determination, she presented evidence that painted Eliza as a vengeful and calculating murderer. The prosecution called upon witnesses who testified to Eliza's history of manipulation and deceit, revealing a web of lies that she had spun around Bobby and Lucy. Defense attorney Lena Jacobs-Carcel, a skilled and tenacious lawyer, fought tooth and nail to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. She argued that the evidence against Eliza was circumstantial and that there were other possible suspects who could have committed the crimes. Jacobs-Carcel called upon character witnesses who spoke highly of Eliza's demeanor and disputed the prosecution's claims. The trial was not without its emotional moments. The victims' families, still grieving the loss of their loved ones, sat in the courtroom, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and despair. They listened intently to every word spoken, desperate for justice to be served. After weeks of deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the foreperson stood up and pronounced Eliza Nurtek guilty on all charges. Gasps filled the room, and the victims' families broke into tears, their long-awaited justice finally realized. Eliza Nurtek was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Some believed that this punishment was too lenient given the heinous nature of her crimes. Others felt that justice had been served and that Eliza would spend the rest of her days behind bars, paying for the lives she had taken. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of all those involved were forever changed. Eliza Nurtek, now confined to a prison cell, had to face the consequences of her actions. She was sent to the infamous San Quentin State Prison, known for housing some of the most dangerous criminals in California. Inside the prison walls, Eliza had to adapt to a strict routine, wearing an orange jumpsuit and spending most of her days in a small cell. She was cut off from the outside world, with limited access to phone calls and visits from loved ones. Meanwhile, Jason Harris Packard, burdened by guilt and haunted by the memories of the past, decided to make a fresh start. He moved away and settled in Bakersfield, where he opened a small bakery. With the help of his mother's secret recipes, Jason baked delicious pastries and bread, bringing joy to the locals. His bakery, named Sweet Delights, quickly gained popularity. As for the community, they slowly moved on from the scandal that had captivated them. However, the memory of Bobby Nurtek's murder would forever linger in their minds, serving as a reminder of the fragility of life and the consequences of one's choices. In the end, the trial brought closure to a dark chapter in the community's history. Though scars remained, the community found solace in the fact that justice had been served. They vowed to learn from the tragedy and to strive for a safer and more compassionate society. As we conclude this episode of True Crime Case Files, we reflect on the chilling tale of Nurtek's. In the small town of Lancaster, California, ambition, betrayal, and revenge collided, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. This story serves as a reminder that even in the pursuit of success, one must tread carefully, for the consequences of our actions can be far-reaching and devastating. Paula Kimley Ross was a 38-year-old nurse living in Toronto, Ontario. She worked at Toronto General Hospital, one of the largest and most well-known hospitals in the city. Paula was known for her compassion and dedication to her job. Her co-workers and patients appreciated her caring nature and exceptional skills. She was the kind of nurse who always went the extra mile to help others. Outside of work, Paula was outgoing and loved spending time with her friends and family. She had a passion for fishing and often went to Lake Ontario on weekends to relax and enjoy nature. Paula grew up in the nearby city of Waterloo and attended the University of Toronto, where she earned her nursing degree. She had a close relationship with her parents, Margaret and John Kimley, who still lived in the house where she grew up. Paula also had a younger brother, Michael, who worked as a teacher in a nearby school. They often had family dinners and spent holidays together. Her friends described her as bubbly and full of life, always ready to lend a helping hand or share a laugh. She was known for her love of coffee from Tim Hortons, often seen with a cup in hand during her shifts. Paula's personal life was complicated. Paula had a boyfriend named James Deacon. James was married, and their affair was filled with trust issues and frequent arguments. Paula confided in her best friend and ex-lover, Emma Kwong, about her troubles and dreams of finding happiness and peace. She hoped to sort out her relationships and move forward with a fresh start. In the days before her death, Paula was busy with her work at the hospital. She was involved in a new project aimed at improving patient care and was excited about the positive changes it would bring. She spent her evenings chatting with Emma, planning a weekend fishing trip to clear her mind and find some peace. On the last day of her life, Paula had a long shift at the hospital, but still found time to call her mother and make plans for a family dinner the following week. On October 12, 2012, a chilly Friday morning, Toronto was waking up to a crisp autumn day. The leaves were turning shades of orange and red, and the air was cool. Paula's neighbor, Robert Chu, noticed that her apartment seemed unusually quiet. Robert, a retired postman, often saw Paula in the mornings, either heading to work or out for a jog. But for the past few days, he hadn't seen her at all. This worried him. Robert decided to check on Paula. He walked over to her apartment and knocked on the door. But there was no answer. He called out her name, but the apartment remained silent. Feeling uneasy, Robert tried the door and found it unlocked. He stepped inside and immediately sensed something was wrong. The apartment was eerily quiet, and a strange smell lingered in the air. As Robert walked through the hallway, he noticed the living room was in disarray. Furniture was overturned, and there were signs of a struggle. His heart raced as he moved towards the kitchen. That's when he saw Paula. She was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. Her body was horribly mutilated, with her limbs missing and her throat slit so severely that she was almost beheaded. Overwhelmed with shock and fear, Robert stumbled backward and nearly fell. He fumbled for his phone and dialed 911, his hands shaking. When the operator answered, Robert's voice was trembling as he described the gruesome scene. The operator tried to calm him down and assured him that help was on the way. While waiting for the police, Robert stood outside Paula's apartment, staring blankly at the ground. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. A few minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. 2 police cars pulled up, followed by an ambulance. Officers quickly exited their vehicles and approached Robert, who directed them to Paula's apartment. The officers entered cautiously, guns drawn, and were met with the same horrific sight that had stunned Robert. They immediately secured the scene and called for additional backup, including homicide detectives and forensic experts. Paramedics arrived but quickly realized there was nothing they could do for Paula. The news of Paula's death spread quickly through the neighborhood and soon made headlines. Local media outlets, such as the Toronto Star and CP24, covered the shocking story. Neighbors gathered in small groups, talking in hushed tones about the brutal murder that had occurred in their quiet community. The police arrived quickly at Paula's apartment on the morning of October 12, 2012. Detective Zara Singh and her partner, Detective Mark Benson, were in charge of the investigation. Detective Singh, known for her sharp intuition and calm demeanor, led the team. Detective Benson, experienced and methodical, supported her every step of the way. The crime scene was horrifying. Paula's body was found in the kitchen, lying in a pool of blood. Her limbs were missing, and her throat was slit so deeply that she was almost beheaded. The living room showed signs of a violent struggle. Furniture was overturned, and items were scattered across the floor. Blood spatter patterns indicated a fierce fight had taken place. Detectives Singh and Benson examined the scene closely. They noted that the attack appeared personal, likely driven by intense anger or jealousy. The brutal nature of the wounds suggested a crime of passion. They knew they had to act quickly to find the killer. The forensic team arrived shortly after the detectives. They began by photographing the entire apartment, capturing every detail. They used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains, which glowed under a special blue light. Fingerprint powder was dusted on surfaces to gather prints. The team also collected hair and fiber samples for further analysis. Detective Singh spoke to Robert Chu, Paula's neighbor who had found her body. He was still shaken, his voice trembling as he recounted the events of that morning. Robert described Paula as a friendly and caring neighbor, and he couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm her. While the forensic team worked inside, Detectives Singh and Benson canvassed the neighborhood. They spoke to other neighbors and nearby shop owners, asking if they had seen or heard anything unusual in the days leading up to the murder. Some neighbors reported hearing loud arguments from Paula's apartment, while others mentioned seeing unfamiliar people around. The detectives also reviewed security footage from nearby stores and street cameras. They hoped to spot anyone entering or leaving Paula's apartment around the time of the murder. They paid particular attention to footage from a nearby Tim Hortons, Canada's favorite coffee shop where Paula was known to visit regularly. As the day progressed, the evidence collected from the crime scene began to paint a clearer picture of the events that led to Paula's death. The detectives knew they had to follow every lead and piece together the puzzle to bring justice for Paula and her grieving family. The brutal and tragic nature of Paula's murder left a deep impact on the community. Local news outlets, including the Toronto Star and CBC News, provided continuous updates, and residents anxiously awaited news of the arrest. Detectives Singh and Benson remained determined to solve the case, knowing the killer was still out there. The first suspect the police investigated was James L. Deacon, 55, an IT specialist. James was known for his intelligence and meticulous nature. He worked long hours and was often described as introverted. He had been in a volatile relationship with Paula for several months. Their relationship was full of arguments and accusations of cheating. Friends and co-workers noticed James had become increasingly paranoid and possessive in the months leading up to Paula's murder. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson brought James in for questioning on the afternoon of October 13, 2012. He looked tired and nervous. During the interrogation, James's emotions swung wildly. He was clearly distressed, sometimes showing anger and other times appearing deeply sad. He denied any involvement in Paula's death, claiming he was at work at the time of the murder. He provided his work schedule and contact information for his boss and colleagues, hoping to verify his alibi. But detectives asked James about his relationship with Paula. He admitted they had frequent fights, mostly about trust issues. James said Paula was suspicious of his interactions with other women and men. He confessed that their last argument had been particularly heated. Paula had accused him of cheating, and he had stormed out of her apartment. This was 2 days before her body was found. Detective Singh pressed James on his feelings towards Paula. He admitted he still had strong feelings for her, despite their problems. He also revealed that Paula had been thinking about ending their relationship, which made him very upset. This revelation raised suspicion about his possible motive. The police then searched James' apartment and car. They were looking for any evidence that could link him to the crime. The forensic team found several items of interest, including a set of knives in his kitchen. They took these knives to the lab to compare them with the wounds on Paula's body. They also took samples of fibers and hairs found in James' car. James' co-workers confirmed he was at work on the day of Paula's murder, but detectives still had doubts. His alibi was strong, but his erratic behavior and emotional responses kept him under close scrutiny. They decided to keep a close watch on him while continuing to investigate other leads. Detectives Singh and Benson knew they needed more concrete evidence to either clear James or confirm their suspicions. The second suspect the police investigated was Emma Kwong, 35. Emma was Paula's best friend and one-time ex-girlfriend. She was known for being loyal, outspoken, and very protective of Paula. Emma worked at a small firm in Toronto. She and Paula had a very close relationship, and Emma often confided in Paula about her life and problems. Emma had a strong dislike for James and was also known to desire an affair with Paula, which made her a person of interest in the investigation. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson brought Emma in for questioning on October 14, 2012. Emma appeared calm but visibly upset by the loss of her friend. She told the detectives that she had last seen Paula a few days before her death. They had met for coffee at Tim Hortons and talked about Paula's troubled relationships over a case of Timbits. Emma admitted she never liked James and had always warned Paula about him. She believed James was too controlling and not good for Paula. The detectives asked Emma about her own relationship with Paula. Emma spoke fondly of their deep friendship and past romantic involvement. She confessed she still had feelings for Paula and wished they could have been more than friends again. However, Emma insisted she would never harm Paula and wanted only the best for her. She seemed genuinely heartbroken by Paula's death. When asked about her whereabouts on the day of Paula's murder, Emma said she was at work and provided her work schedule as well as contact details for her colleagues. Her co-workers confirmed her alibi, stating that Emma had been at the office all day and had even worked late on a project. The detectives then searched Emma's apartment and car. They found nothing out of the ordinary, no signs of blood or anything linking her to the crime. However, they did find several letters and messages from Paula, which showed the close and sometimes intense nature of their relationship. These messages indicated that Paula often leaned on Emma for support during tough times, especially when dealing with James. Despite Emma's clear alibi and lack of physical evidence tying her to the crime scene, detectives Singh and Benson couldn't ignore her strong feelings for Paula and her open dislike for James. They decided to keep Emma under observation while they continued their investigation. On October 20, 2012, a chilly and overcast Saturday morning, the Toronto Police Department received a crucial tip. An anonymous caller reported seeing a suspicious bag in a dumpster behind a local Starbucks on Queen Street West. The caller mentioned that the bag appeared out of place and had a strong, unpleasant smell. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson were immediately dispatched to the location. Upon arrival, they spotted the black garbage bag in question. As they carefully opened it, they found several blood-stained items, including a kitchen knife, torn clothing, and a pair of rubber gloves. These items were promptly collected and sent to the forensic lab for analysis. The detectives hoped this new evidence would provide fresh leads. The forensic team, led by Dr. Karen Lee, worked quickly to process the items. The kitchen knife had traces of Paula's blood, and the gloves had fingerprints. They also found fibers on the torn clothing that matched those found in Paula's house. This new evidence was promising, but the detectives needed more to link it directly to the killer. While the forensic team analyzed the evidence, Detectives Singh and Benson revisited Paula's friends and family, asking if they recognized the items. No one could identify the clothing or gloves, but the knife seemed to match a set that Paula owned. This connection was crucial, as it indicated the items could have come from Paula's house. Dr. Lee soon reported that the fingerprints on the gloves matched those of Lorelei Duncan Deacon, James' wife. Lorelei had not been a primary suspect until this discovery. Lorelei, 52, was known for her cooking skills and often used similar knives in her kitchen. This new evidence placed her under the spotlight. Detectives Singh and Benson decided to bring Lorelei in for questioning. She appeared nervous but maintained her innocence, claiming she had no idea how her fingerprints could be on the gloves. Lorelei explained that she often used gloves while gardening and must have misplaced them. The detectives were skeptical but needed more proof. They obtained a warrant to search Lorelei's house. During the search, they found several more gloves that matched the pair in the dumpster. They also discovered a journal in which Lorelei detailed her growing suspicions about James' affair with Paula. The journal entries showed Lorelei's increasing anger and paranoia. With this new evidence, Detectives Singh and Benson felt they were getting closer to solving the case. The detectives knew they needed to proceed carefully to ensure they caught the right person. The next suspect the police investigated was David Larzuelo, 23. David was charming and charismatic, with a history of intense but short-lived relationships. He had briefly dated James about a year before Paula's murder. Although the affair had ended, David and James had stayed in contact. David was known for his unpredictable behavior and habitual pot smoking, which made the police consider him a potential threat. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson brought David in for questioning on October 22, 2012. David appeared relaxed and nonchalant, but the detectives knew they needed to dig deeper. They began by asking him about his relationship with James. David admitted they had dated, but claimed they were now just friends. He said they had not seen each other in weeks and that he had no interest in rekindling their relationship. When asked about his whereabouts on the day of Paula's murder, David said he had been hanging out with friends at a local bar, the Drake Hotel on Queen Street West. He provided the names of his friends and mentioned they had spent the evening watching a hockey game on TV. The detectives followed up with his friends, who confirmed his alibi. They said David had been with them all night and had left the bar around midnight. Despite his solid alibi, the detectives decided to search David's apartment. They found nothing suspicious at first glance other than an unusual amount of drug paraphernalia. However, they did discover a notebook filled with angry and obsessive thoughts about James. The entry suggested David was still upset about their breakup and jealous of James' other relationships. This raised questions about David's potential motive. David's behavior during the interrogation was calm and almost too relaxed, which made the detectives wary. They decided to keep him under surveillance while continuing to gather evidence. They also checked his phone records and social media activity to see if there were any connections to Paula or other suspicious behavior. The community, closely following the investigation through local news outlets, was anxious for any new developments. The brutal nature of Paula's murder and the growing list of suspects kept everyone on edge. As the detectives continued their work, they knew they had to be thorough to bring justice to Paula and her family. The investigation into David provided more questions than answers, but it also helped the detectives understand the complex web of relationships surrounding Paula. With each new piece of evidence, they moved closer to finding the truth and solving the case that had gripped the entire city. On October 28, 2012, a cold and rainy Sunday afternoon, the Toronto Police Department made a breakthrough. Forensic analysis had finally provided the crucial link needed to solve Paula's murder. The fingerprints on the rubber gloves found in the dumpster behind Starbucks matched Lorelei Duncan Deacon, James' wife. Lorelei, 52, was known for her cooking skills and often used similar knives in her kitchen. The detectives had previously questioned her, but she had maintained her innocence. Now, with this new evidence, Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson knew they had to act quickly. Lorelei's motive was clear. She had discovered that her husband James had kindled his affair with Paula. Lorelei had warned James to end the relationship to save their marriage, but he had not listened. Her escalating paranoia and sense of betrayal drove her into a fit of rage. In her anger, Lorelei had decided to murder Paula in her home. The details were gruesome. Paula was found with multiple stab wounds, her limbs missing, and her throat slit so severely she was almost beheaded. Lorelei had even used meat from Paula's limbs to make a soup she called infidelity soup, which she then secretly served to her husband. On the evening of October 28, 2012, Detective Singh and Detective Benson, along with a team of officers, arrived at Lorelei's house. It was cold and raining heavily. They knocked on the door, and Lorelei answered, looking surprised and anxious. When they told her she was under arrest for the murder of Paula Kinley Ross, Lorelei tried to maintain her composure but was visibly shaken. As Lorelei was handcuffed and taken to the police station, she remained mostly silent. She seemed to be in shock, occasionally muttering about soup and infidelity. The arrest was covered widely in the media, with news outlets reporting every detail. Paula's family was relieved to hear that the murderer had been caught. They expressed their gratitude to the police for their hard work and dedication. Paula's mother, Mary Kinley, said, "We can finally begin to heal now that we know the person responsible for this horrific act is in custody." James, on the other hand, was devastated. He had lost both his lover, and now his wife was facing serious charges. The community was also relieved but remained in shock over the brutal nature of the crime and the unexpected identity of the murderer. The detectives felt a sense of accomplishment, but knew the case was not over yet. The next steps involved preparing for the trial and ensuring that Lorelei faced justice for her heinous crime. The trial of Lorelei Duncan Deacon for the murder of Paula Kinley Ross began on January 15, 2013, in a packed Toronto courthouse. The prosecution was led by Rachel Blythe, a seasoned Crown prosecutor known for her fierce dedication to justice. Blythe, 42, presented a compelling case against Lorelei. She described the brutal nature of the crime and highlighted the overwhelming evidence, including the fingerprints on the gloves and the forensic match of the knife to Paula's kitchen. Blythe argued that Lorelei's jealousy and paranoia drove her to commit the horrific act. She pointed to Lorelei's journal entries detailing her suspicions and anger about James' affair with Paula. The prosecutor also emphasized the shocking details of how Lorelei had used parts of Paula's body to make infidelity soup, which she then served to her unsuspecting husband. Blythe's presentation was meticulous and emotionally charged, painting a vivid picture of Lorelei's calculated and gruesome actions. The defense attorney, Michael Roberts, 38, took a different approach. Roberts was known for his calm demeanor and sharp legal mind. He argued that Lorelei was mentally unstable and had acted in a moment of temporary insanity. He presented medical records showing Lorelei had been under significant stress and had a history of mental health issues. Roberts also brought in expert witnesses who testified about the impact of her deteriorating mental state on her actions. Throughout the trial, Paula's family attended every session. They listened intently, often holding back tears as the details of Paula's final moments were recounted. Mary Kinley, Paula's mother, was visibly distraught but determined to see justice served. The emotional toll on the family was palpable, and the courtroom atmosphere was tense. On February 10, 2013, after several days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Lorelei Duncan Deacon was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to the maximum sentence, 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 15 years. As the verdict was read, Lorelei showed little emotion, staring blankly ahead. James, sitting in the back of the courtroom, broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the reality of his wife's fate and his own part in the tragic events. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a harrowing chapter for Paula's loved ones and the beginning of their long journey toward healing. After Lorelei Duncan Deacon's trial, life for everyone involved began to change. James Deacon, Lorelei's husband, faced the most dramatic changes. With his wife in prison, James was left to pick up the pieces of his life. He sought therapy to deal with the trauma and guilt of the affair that had set off the tragic chain of events. James also distanced himself from his old social circles, finding it difficult to face those who knew the full story. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson returned to their regular duties, but felt the weight of the case long after it was closed. Their work had brought some justice to Paula's family, but the brutality of the crime left a lasting impact on them. They were praised by the Toronto Police Department for their dedication and perseverance, with local news outlets like the Toronto Star and CP24 highlighting their efforts in bringing Lorelei to justice. Emma Quam, Paula's best friend and one-time romantic partner, continued her work as a graphic designer but found it hard to focus. She attended counseling sessions to cope with the loss and betrayal she felt. Emma also became an advocate for domestic violence victims, speaking at events and sharing Paula's story in hopes of preventing similar tragedies. David Larzuelo, the young man previously investigated, was relieved to be cleared but haunted by his connection to the case. He moved to Vancouver, seeking a fresh start away from the painful memories in Toronto. David pursued a career in social work, inspired by Paula's compassion and dedication to helping others. Life after the trial was a mixture of healing and remembrance. Paula's legacy lived on through the positive changes and awareness her tragic death inspired. Her family and friends continued to honor her memory by living out the values she held dear: compassion, dedication, and a commitment to helping others. It was a warm evening on June 29, 2019 in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. The summer sun had just set, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. At around 8:30 p.m., Josh Parker, a 33-year-old software engineer, made a frantic call to the Old Saybrook Police Department. He had just found his wife, Vanessa Parker, dead in their master bedroom. Josh had been out running errands that evening. He went to Stop and Shop to pick up groceries and then swung by Starbucks for a coffee. When he returned home, he noticed that the house was unusually quiet. Calling out for Vanessa, he received no response. Concerned, he walked up the stairs to their bedroom, where he discovered the horrifying scene. Vanessa, a 32-year-old event planner, was lying on the floor, her wedding veil wrapped tightly around her neck. The room was a mess, with furniture overturned and personal items scattered everywhere, showing signs of a struggle. Josh immediately dialed 911, his voice trembling as he described the situation. When the dispatcher asked Josh to check for a pulse, he complied, but it was clear Vanessa was gone. His shock turned to despair as he sat on the floor beside her, waiting for the police to arrive. He was visibly shaken, his hands trembling and his face pale. Despite the trauma, he managed to stay on the line with the dispatcher, answering questions and providing as much information as he could. Within minutes, the Old Saybrook police arrived at the scene. Officers secured the area and took charge of the investigation. Neighbors gathered outside, their faces reflecting a mix of shock and curiosity. A usually serene neighborhood was now buzzing with activity as news of the incident spread. Local media, including the Hartford Courant and Channel 3 Eyewitness News, arrived on the scene, capturing footage of the police activity and interviewing neighbors who expressed their disbelief over the tragedy. The discovery of Vanessa Parker's body marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would uncover shocking secrets and lead to a devastating conclusion. As the night wore on, the police worked diligently to gather evidence and piece together the events that led to Vanessa's untimely death. Vanessa Parker was 32 years old at the time of her death. She was an event planner in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, known for her demanding and perfectionist nature. Friends and family had nicknamed her Bridezilla in the months before her wedding. Vanessa lived with her husband, Josh Parker, in a cozy house on Main Street. They had recently spent $100,000 on their lavish wedding, which took place at the historic Saybrook Point Inn, a popular venue for such grand events. Vanessa was ambitious and meticulous in her work and quickly made a name for herself in the event planning industry. She was the go-to person for organizing upscale weddings and corporate events in the area. Her clients included high-profile companies and wealthy families who admired her dedication and attention to detail. Despite her demanding personality, Vanessa had a close group of friends who respected her drive. Her best friend, Jessica Moore, was always by her side. Jessica, a marketing manager, had been Vanessa's confidant since their college days. They often met at the local cafe at Ashlawn Farm Coffee to discuss work and life over a cup of their favorite brew. In the days leading up to her death, Vanessa was busy finalizing details for an upcoming corporate event. She had spent hours working on seating arrangements and floral designs, determined to make everything perfect. Despite the stress, Vanessa had big dreams. She wanted to expand her business, possibly opening a second office in New York City. She envisioned herself as a leading figure in the event planning world, admired for her creativity and professionalism. Vanessa's life seemed perfect on the outside, but she carried a burden of secrets. Her demanding nature and high standards often put a strain on her relationships. The discovery of her body marked the tragic end of a life filled with ambition and dreams, leaving her family and friends in shock and grief. The Old Saybrook police arrived at the Parker residence within minutes of Josh's frantic 911 call on June 29, 2019. The team was led by Detective Sarah Collins, a seasoned investigator with 15 years of experience. Detective Collins, known for her thorough and methodical approach, quickly took control of the scene. As the officers entered the master bedroom, they were met with a chaotic and disturbing sight. The room was in complete disarray, with furniture overturned and personal items scattered across the floor. Vanessa Parker's body lay on the floor, her wedding veil tightly wrapped around her neck. The scene suggested a violent struggle had taken place. Detective Collins noted the presence of broken glass, likely from a shattered lamp, and bloodstains on the carpet, adding to the grim tableau. The initial assessment pointed to a crime of passion. Vanessa's death appeared to be the result of strangulation, a brutal and personal method of murder. The use of her own wedding veil as the murder weapon added a chilling element to the crime, indicating a deep emotional connection between the victim and the perpetrator. Detective Collins and her team began their meticulous investigation. They documented the scene with photographs and sketches, ensuring every detail was captured. They collected fingerprints from various surfaces, hoping to find matches that could identify the killer. Fibers and hair samples were also gathered, providing additional forensic evidence that might link the suspect to the crime scene. The police used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains, illuminating areas that had been cleaned in an attempt to cover up the crime. They also utilized advanced tools like 3D scanners to create a detailed digital model of the room, allowing them to analyze the positions and movements during the struggle. Detective Collins interviewed Josh Parker, who was visibly shaken and cooperative. He provided an alibi for his whereabouts earlier in the evening, claiming he had been running errands. Despite his calm demeanor, the detectives kept him under close scrutiny, aware that spouses are often primary suspects in such cases. Neighbors were also interviewed, with officers canvassing the area to gather any information about unusual activities or suspicious individuals. The local community was in shock, and the media, including the Hartford Courant and Channel 3 Eyewitness News, reported on the tragic event, increasing pressure on the police to solve the case quickly. As the investigation progressed, Detective Collins and her team remained focused and determined, knowing that solving Vanessa Parker's murder required piecing together every bit of evidence and uncovering the hidden truths behind her tragic death. Josh Parker, Vanessa's husband, was the first person the police investigated. At 33 years old, Josh worked as a software engineer. He was known for his calm and composed nature, which often complemented Vanessa's demanding personality. However, the pressure of their lavish $100,000 wedding had taken a toll on him. Friends mentioned that Josh had been more stressed lately, trying to keep up with Vanessa's high expectations and the financial strain. The police brought Josh in for questioning on June 30, 2019, the day after Vanessa's body was found. Detective Sarah Collins led the interrogation. Josh appeared tired and distraught, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Despite his exhaustion, he maintained a cooperative attitude. He recounted his activities on the evening of June 29th, explaining that he had been running errands, including stops at Stop and Shop and Starbucks, before returning home to find Vanessa. During the questioning, Detective Collins noticed Josh's hands were trembling slightly, a sign of his nervousness. He described his relationship with Vanessa as loving, but admitted that her demanding nature had been challenging. He mentioned the strain of planning their expensive wedding and the arguments they had about money. Josh's demeanor remained mostly calm, but there were moments when his voice wavered, revealing the depth of his emotional turmoil. The police asked Josh about his whereabouts during the estimated time of Vanessa's death. He provided detailed accounts of his activities, including receipts from the grocery store and the coffee shop to support his alibi. Despite his cooperative behavior, Detective Collins and her team knew they needed to verify every detail. They collected Josh's fingerprints and took a DNA sample to compare with the evidence found at the crime scene. Friends and family described Josh as a patient and understanding person. He was known for his supportive nature, often going out of his way to help Vanessa with her event planning business. However, the financial burden of their wedding and Vanessa's high expectations had pushed him to his limits. Detective Collins continued to probe, looking for any inconsistencies in Josh's story. They asked him about any recent arguments or conflicts with Vanessa, to which he admitted they had fought about money and the wedding expenses. Despite the tension, he insisted that he would never harm Vanessa. As the investigation progressed, the police kept a close eye on Josh. His cooperative attitude and detailed alibi were crucial, but Detective Collins knew that uncovering the truth required thorough and meticulous work. They needed to explore every lead to ensure they did not overlook any crucial evidence. Jessica Moore, Vanessa's best friend and maid of honor, was the next person the police investigated. Jessica was 31 years old and worked as a marketing manager. Known for her cheerful and supportive demeanor, she was a loyal friend to Vanessa despite her demanding nature. Jessica and Vanessa had been inseparable since their college days at the University of Connecticut, where they both majored in business. On June 30, 2019, Detective Sarah Collins and her team brought Jessica in for questioning. Jessica appeared visibly shaken, her eyes red from crying. She described her relationship with Vanessa as close and supportive. They often met at Ashlawn Farm Coffee to catch up and discuss their lives. Jessica recounted the days leading up to Vanessa's death, explaining that they had been busy with last-minute wedding preparations. During the interrogation, a shocking revelation came to light. Jessica was not just Vanessa's friend. She was also her lover and secret wife. The two had been married for 3 years, a fact they had kept hidden from everyone, including Josh. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the investigation. Jessica admitted that she and Vanessa had been planning to defraud Josh by blackmailing him with compromising photos Vanessa had taken. Detective Collins noticed Jessica's nervousness as she spoke. Her voice trembled and she fidgeted with her hands. Despite her anxiety, Jessica insisted that she had no part in Vanessa's murder. She explained that their blackmail scheme was meant to secure financial stability for both of them, not to harm anyone. Jessica's emotional turmoil was evident, but she maintained her innocence throughout the questioning. The police asked Jessica about her whereabouts on the night of Vanessa's death. She provided an alibi stating that she had been at home, working on a marketing campaign for her company. She mentioned specific details about the campaign, including emails and files she had worked on, which the police later verified. They also collected Jessica's fingerprints and DNA samples to compare with the evidence found at the crime scene. Friends and colleagues described Jessica as a hardworking and dedicated individual. She was well-liked at her job and known for her positive attitude. However, the revelation of her secret relationship with Vanessa and their blackmail scheme cast a shadow over her character. As the investigation continued, Detective Collins and her team remained focused on uncovering the truth. Jessica's emotional state and detailed alibi were important factors, but the detectives knew they had to examine all aspects of her relationship with Vanessa and their secret plans. On July 2, 2019, 3 days after Vanessa Parker's death, a break in the case emerged. It was a humid afternoon in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, with temperatures climbing into the high 80s. Detective Sarah Collins received a call from a local resident who claimed to have found something suspicious while walking his dog in a nearby park. He had been walking his golden retriever, Buddy Rogers Jr., through Saybrook Point Park when Buddy started barking at a bush near the water's edge. Curious, he approached and discovered a smartphone partially hidden under the foliage. Realizing the potential significance, he immediately contacted the police. Detective Collins and her team quickly arrived at the scene. The phone was carefully collected and sent to the forensics lab for analysis. Within hours, technicians managed to unlock the phone and retrieve its data. What they found would change the course of the investigation. The phone belonged to Vanessa Parker. Among the texts, photos, and emails, investigators found a series of incriminating messages between Vanessa and her secret wife, co-conspirator and lover, Jessica Moore. The messages detailed their blackmail scheme against Josh Parker, with explicit instructions on how to execute their plan after the wedding. Additionally, the phone contained compromising photos of Josh that were meant to be used as leverage for blackmail. Detective Collins reviewed the new evidence with a mix of relief and determination. The messages revealed the extent of Vanessa and Jessica's plot, providing a clearer motive for the crime. The team also discovered a series of heated exchanges between Vanessa and an unknown number, later identified as belonging to Michael Reynolds, Vanessa's other spouse from San Diego. The text showed that Michael was furious about Vanessa's threats to release a sex tape involving her and his mother, adding another layer to the complex web of relationships and motives. With this new evidence, the police focused on tracking the movements of Jessica and Michael around the time of the murder. They checked surveillance footage from nearby stores and traffic cameras, trying to establish their whereabouts. The forensic team also compared the fingerprints and DNA found on the phone with those collected at the crime scene. The discovery of Vanessa's phone was a significant breakthrough. It provided crucial insights into the motives and actions of the key suspects. Detective Collins and her team felt a renewed sense of urgency and determination to bring the case to a close. They knew they were getting closer to uncovering the truth behind Vanessa Parker's tragic death. Michael Reynolds, Vanessa's other spouse, was the third person the police investigated. Michael, 40, worked as a construction manager in San Diego. He had a reputation for being hot-headed and had a tumultuous past with Vanessa. Despite moving on, he had occasional run-ins with her, leading to speculation about lingering feelings and unresolved issues. On July 3, 2019, Detective Sarah Collins and her team brought Michael in for questioning. Michael had flown in from San Diego after hearing about Vanessa's death. He appeared agitated and defensive during the interrogation, his frustration evident in his clenched fists and terse answers. He described his relationship with Vanessa as volatile, marked by frequent arguments and dramatic reconciliations. Michael revealed that Vanessa had been blackmailing him, threatening to release a sex tape she had made with his mother. This revelation painted a picture of Vanessa as manipulative and ruthless, willing to go to extreme lengths to control those around her. Michael admitted that he was furious with Vanessa, but insisted that he would never harm her. The police asked Michael about his whereabouts on the night of Vanessa's death. He claimed he was in San Diego working late on a construction project. Michael provided contact details for his coworkers, who corroborated his alibi. He also showed flight records to prove he had only arrived in Connecticut after learning about the murder. Detective Collins noticed Michael's volatility during the questioning. He frequently raised his voice and seemed on the verge of losing his temper. Despite his anger, Michael consistently denied any involvement in Vanessa's death. He expressed relief at being away from her manipulations, but also a sense of regret for the way their relationship had turned out. Friends and colleagues described Michael as hardworking but prone to outbursts of anger. His temper was well known in his professional circles, but he was also respected for his dedication to his work. The revelation of his tumultuous relationship with Vanessa and the blackmail added a layer of complexity to his character. The police collected Michael's fingerprints and DNA samples, comparing them with the evidence found at the crime scene. They also examined his phone records and text messages, looking for any signs of communication with Vanessa leading up to her death. As the investigation continued, Detective Collins and her team remained vigilant, aware that the truth was often hidden beneath layers of lies and deception. Michael's volatile nature and detailed alibi were crucial pieces of the puzzle, but the detectives knew they had to keep digging to uncover the full story behind Vanessa Parker's tragic death. On July 5, 2019, Detective Sarah Collins and her team finally identified the murderer. Josh Parker, Vanessa's husband, was the one who strangled her with her wedding veil. The breakthrough came after the police meticulously analyzed the evidence found on Vanessa's phone and the crime scene. Josh Parker, 33, had always seemed like the perfect husband. He was a calm and composed software engineer admired for his patience and supportive nature. However, beneath this calm exterior, Josh was struggling with the immense pressure of Vanessa's demanding personality and the financial strain of their $100,000 wedding. The discovery of Vanessa's secrets pushed him over the edge. The night before Vanessa's murder, Josh had discovered incriminating messages and photos on her phone. He found out about Vanessa's secret marriages to Jessica Moore and Michael Reynolds, as well as the blackmail schemes. This shocking betrayal led to a heated argument between Josh and Vanessa, which escalated into a physical struggle. Detective Collins pieced together the events leading up to the murder. Vanessa's veil was used to strangle her in the master bedroom, indicating a crime of passion. The disarray in the room and the evidence of a struggle pointed to Josh as the perpetrator. The police compared Josh's DNA and fingerprints with those found at the crime scene, confirming his involvement. On the evening of July 5, 2019, Detective Collins and her team moved in to arrest Josh Parker. They found him at the couple's home on Main Street, sitting in the living room, seemingly lost in thought. The officers approached him cautiously, explaining the charges and reading him his rights. Josh did not resist. Instead, he seemed resigned, his expression a mix of sorrow and relief. As the handcuffs were placed on Josh, he looked around the room one last time. He was not surprised by his arrest. He knew it was inevitable. The Parker family's reactions were a mix of shock and sorrow. Vanessa's parents, Robert and Linda Parker, were devastated by the news, struggling to comprehend the tragedy that had unfolded. Vanessa's sister, Emily, was inconsolable, mourning the loss of her sister and the collapse of their family. The arrest of Josh Parker brought some closure to the investigation, but left a trail of heartbreak in its wake. The Parker family and their friends grappled with the reality of Vanessa's death and the betrayal within their own home. The community of Old Saybrook was left reeling, trying to make sense of the tragic events that had shattered their sense of security. The trial of Josh Parker began on October 15, 2022, at the Middlesex Superior Court in Middletown, Connecticut. The courtroom was packed with media, including reporters from the Hartford Courant and Channel 3 Eyewitness News. The case had attracted significant attention due to the shocking nature of the crime and the revelations about Vanessa Parker's secret lives. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Brown Hemley, a 45-year-old known for her tenacity and keen legal mind. Brown Hemley argued that Josh Parker had premeditated the murder after discovering Vanessa's secret marriages and blackmail schemes. She presented the evidence found on Vanessa's phone, including the incriminating messages and photos, as well as the forensic evidence linking Josh to the crime scene. Brown Hemley painted a picture of a man pushed to his limits by betrayal and financial stress, culminating in a violent act of rage. The defense attorney, Brian Stevens, a 50-year-old with a reputation for his persuasive arguments and empathetic approach, argued that Josh Parker had acted in a moment of temporary insanity. Stevens claimed that the discovery of Vanessa's double life and deceit had caused Josh to lose control. He portrayed Josh as a loving husband driven to a breaking point by the overwhelming stress and emotional turmoil. The trial lasted 3 weeks with emotional testimonies from family members and friends. Vanessa's parents, Robert and Linda Parker, attended every day, their faces etched with grief. Vanessa's sister, Emily, often broke down in tears, struggling to cope with the loss and the betrayal by her brother-in-law. The courtroom atmosphere was tense, with both the prosecution and defense presenting compelling arguments. On November 19, 2022, the jury delivered their verdict. Josh Parker was found guilty of second-degree murder. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Vanessa's family expressed relief that justice had been served, though the pain of their loss remained. Some community members felt the sentence was too lenient, given the premeditated nature of the crime. Judge Karen Miller sentenced Josh Parker to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. In her sentencing remarks, she acknowledged the emotional and psychological strain Josh had been under, but emphasized that taking a life was an unforgivable act. Josh showed little reaction as the sentence was read, his face a mask of resignation. The verdict and sentencing had a profound impact on all involved. Vanessa's family and friends continued to grapple with their grief, finding some solace in the justice system's decision. The trial's outcome was seen as a step toward healing, though the scars left by Vanessa's death, and the trial would linger for years to come. After the trial, the lives of everyone involved were forever changed. Josh Parker began serving his 25-year prison sentence at the MacDougall Walker Correctional Institution in Suffield, Connecticut. The facility, known for its high security, became Josh's new home as he adjusted to life behind bars. Reports from local news outlets, including the Hartford Courant, followed his transition, noting his attempts to come to terms with his actions and the reality of his long sentence. Josh's family struggled to cope with the fallout. His parents, who had been supportive throughout the trial, found it difficult to visit him. They faced the dual challenge of dealing with their son's incarceration and the public scrutiny surrounding the case. They occasionally spoke with reporters, expressing their sorrow over the tragedy and their hope for Josh's eventual redemption. Vanessa Parker's family tried to rebuild their lives after the trial. Vanessa's parents, Robert and Linda Parker, continued to live in Old Saybrook, where they were active in local memorial activities to honor Vanessa's memory. They set up a scholarship fund in her name at her alma mater, the University of Connecticut, to support students pursuing careers in event planning. The scholarship was reported by local media as a way to keep Vanessa's legacy alive and contribute positively to the community. Jessica Moore, who had initially been a key suspect, faced her own challenges. Though she was not charged with any crime, the revelation of her secret marriage to Vanessa and their blackmail scheme led to a significant loss of her professional reputation. Jessica left her job as a marketing manager and moved to a different state to start anew, distancing herself from the scandal. She maintained a low profile, with few public appearances reported. Michael Reynolds, Vanessa's other spouse, also tried to move forward. He continued his work in San Diego but faced ongoing media attention due to his involvement in the case. He occasionally spoke out about the impact of Vanessa's blackmail on his life, expressing his hope for personal healing and closure. Overall, the aftermath of Vanessa Parker's murder and Josh Parker's trial left deep emotional scars on all involved. The community of Old Saybrook slowly began to recover, with residents coming together to support one another and remember Vanessa. The tragic events had a lasting impact, shaping the lives of those involved for years to come. Larry Harrison was a 42-year-old man who managed a popular Applebee's in Rochester, Minnesota. He was known for being warm and friendly. Larry was a big fan of the Minnesota Vikings and loved watching their games. He lived with his wife, Lauren, and their teenage son. They had a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood where they had lived for many years. Larry's family meant everything to him. He and Lauren had been married for over 15 years. They met in college and quickly fell in love. Larry was a devoted father who always found time for his son Brian, whether it was helping with homework or coaching his little league team. Larry's friendly nature made him a well-loved figure in Rochester. He often volunteered at the local food bank and participated in community cleanup events. In the days leading up to his death, Larry was busy planning a community event at his restaurant to celebrate the end of the football season. He wanted to bring people together for a big feast, featuring everyone's favorite dishes and, of course, the game highlights. The Super Bowl had just taken place on February 1, 2015, with the New England Patriots defeating the Seattle Seahawks. Larry was excited about the event and had been working extra hours to make sure everything was perfect. Larry also had personal plans. He was looking forward to a family trip to the Mall of America, where they planned to visit the amusement park and shop at their favorite stores. Larry was a simple man who found joy in everyday moments with his family and friends. In summary, Larry Harrison was a man who cared deeply about his family, his community, and his work. He was loved by many and had a bright future ahead of him, full of dreams and plans. His untimely death was a shock to everyone who knew him, leaving a void that could never be filled. On the morning of February 8, 2015, at around 7:30 a.m., Lauren Harrison found her husband, Larry, dead in their kitchen. It was a cold and snowy day in Rochester, Minnesota. Lauren had woken up early to prepare breakfast. As she walked into the kitchen, she was met with a horrifying scene. Larry's body lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had been stabbed multiple times. The sight was shocking and terrifying. Lauren immediately screamed for help. Her loud cries woke up the neighbors, who quickly rushed over to see what was happening. One of the neighbors, Mary Benedictus, who lived next door, ran over to check on Lauren. When she saw the gruesome scene, she quickly called 911. Mary described feeling a mix of fear and disbelief. She had known Larry for years and couldn't believe something so horrible could happen. It was like a nightmare, she later told the local news. Larry was such a kind man. I couldn't understand why anyone would do this to him. The 911 operators stayed on the phone with Mary, trying to keep her calm while emergency services were on their way. Lauren, in shock and grief, could barely speak. She kept repeating Larry's name, unable to comprehend the brutal reality before her. Within minutes, the police and paramedics arrived. The first officer on the scene noted the look of absolute horror on Lauren's face. He tried to comfort her while securing the area. Paramedics quickly assessed Larry, but it was clear that he had been dead for some time. News of Larry's death spread quickly through the small town. Local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, reported the shocking incident. Neighbors and friends gathered outside the Harrison home, exchanging whispers and offering support to Lauren and her son. The local community, which had been buzzing with post-Super Bowl excitement just a week earlier, was now in a state of shock and mourning. The discovery of Larry Harrison's body marked the beginning of a tragic and complex investigation, one that would reveal dark secrets and shake the community to its core. The Rochester Police Department arrived quickly at the Harrison home on the morning of February 8, 2015. They secured the area and tried to comfort a shocked and distraught Lauren Harrison. The paramedics soon arrived and confirmed that Larry Harrison was dead. Detective Jonathan Gustafson, a veteran with over 20 years on the force, and Detective Sarah Brown, known for her sharp instincts, were assigned to lead the investigation. They arrived shortly after the initial officers. Detective Gustafson was known for his methodical approach, while Detective Brown had a keen eye for detail. The crime scene in the kitchen was gruesome. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the countertops, and even splattered on the walls. Larry had been stabbed multiple times, indicating a violent struggle. The detectives noted that there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Larry might have known his attacker. Detectives Gustafson and Brown started their investigation by examining the body. Larry had defensive wounds on his arms, which meant he tried to fight off his attacker. The detectives then began to collect evidence. They took fingerprints, blood samples, and photographs of the scene. They'd also collected the knife used in the attack, which was found near Larry's body. Forensic experts were called in to help analyze the evidence. They used tools like luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and UV lights to find any traces of bodily fluids. They also used a technique called bloodstain pattern analysis to understand how the attack happened. This helped them piece together the events leading up to Larry's death. The detectives interviewed Lauren, who was still in shock. She couldn't provide much information at first, but she did mention hearing a noise in the kitchen during the night. The police also talked to the neighbors, including Mary Benedictus, who had called 911. Mary didn't see or hear anything unusual that night. which added to the mystery. The local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, covered the story extensively. The community was in shock. Everyone wanted to know who could have done such a horrible thing to Larry, a well-loved and respected member of their town. The police set up a tip line, hoping someone might come forward with information. As the investigation progressed, the detectives knew they had to act quickly. The evidence pointed to someone close to Larry, but they needed more proof to make an arrest. The crime scene was just the beginning of a complicated and heartbreaking case. The first person the police investigated was Lauren Harrison, Larry's wife. Lauren was 38 years old and worked as a nurse at the local Mayo Clinic. She was known for her caring nature, but the detectives had to look closely at everyone connected to Larry. Lauren had been married to Larry for over 15 years. On the surface, they seemed like a happy couple, but the investigation revealed some troubling secrets. Lauren was having sex with Garmin Wilson, her 18-year-old son's best friend. This affair put a strain on her marriage and made her a suspect in Larry's murder. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Lauren in for questioning. The interview took place at the Rochester Police Department. Lauren appeared nervous and upset, which was understandable given the circumstances. The detectives asked her about her relationship with Larry and if there were any problems in their marriage. Lauren admitted to the affair with Garmin, but insisted she still loved Larry and would never hurt him. The detectives pressed Lauren about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. She claimed she was at home, asleep, and didn't hear anything unusual until she found Larry's body the next morning. The detectives noted her emotional responses, which seemed genuine, but they couldn't rule her out as a suspect just yet. They also asked Lauren about any arguments she and Larry might have had recently. She mentioned that they had been fighting about her affair, but she denied that these arguments ever got physical. Lauren's responses were consistent, but the detectives needed more evidence to determine her involvement in Larry's death. Throughout the investigation, Lauren maintained her innocence. She was cooperative but clearly devastated by Larry's death. Her emotions ranged from sadness to anger as she tried to come to terms with what had happened. The detectives had to consider every possibility, but Lauren's cooperation and the lack of direct evidence against her made it difficult to build a strong case. The police also looked into Lauren's phone records and financial statements. They found no suspicious activity that could link her directly to the murder. However, the affair with Garmin Wilson remained a significant point of interest. The detectives decided to bring Garmin in for questioning as well, hoping he might shed more light on the situation. As the police continued to investigate, they realized they needed to look at other potential suspects. Lauren's affair was a crucial piece of the puzzle, but it didn't provide all the answers. The detectives knew they had to keep digging to find the truth behind Larry Harrison's tragic death. With the discovery of Lauren's affair, the police turned their attention to Garmin Wilson, the 18-year-old best friend of Larry's son and Lauren's secret lover. Garmin was a high school senior and part-time mechanic. He was well-liked and charismatic, but his relationship with Lauren put him in a complicated situation. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Garmin in for questioning on February 9, 2015. The interview took place at the Rochester Police Department. Garmin appeared nervous but cooperative. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Lauren and how it might have affected Larry. Garmin admitted to having sex with Lauren, saying it started a few months ago. He insisted that he had no problems with Larry and that Larry never knew about the affair. Garmin claimed he had been home on the night of the murder, working on a car in his garage. His alibi seemed plausible, but the detectives needed to verify it. The police also questioned Garmin about his feelings toward Larry. Garmin described Larry as a father figure and said he admired him. He was adamant that he had no reason to harm Larry and was deeply saddened by his death. Garmin's emotions appeared genuine, but the detectives couldn't ignore the affair and its potential impact. To check Garmin's alibi, the detectives visited his home and garage. They found the car he claimed to have been working on and interviewed his parents, who confirmed that Garmin was home that night. The alibi held up, but the detectives remained cautious. Detectives Gustafson and Brown also looked into Garmin's phone records and social media. They found many graphic sexts and naked pictures sent between Garmin and Lauren, but nothing that suggested Garmin was involved in the murder. The text showed a sexual relationship, but there were no threats or plans to harm Larry. Garmin's responses during the interrogation were calm and consistent. He showed genuine concern for Lauren and her son, and his cooperation with the police helped his case. However, the detectives still considered him a suspect due to his close relationship with Lauren and the potential motive stemming from the affair. The investigation into Garman revealed no direct evidence linking him to Larry's murder. His alibi and the lack of incriminating messages made it difficult for the police to build a case against him. While Garman remained a person of interest, the detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to either confirm or clear his involvement. As the police continued their investigation, they realized Garman's involvement in the affair complicated the case, but it also highlighted the tangled relationships within the Harrison household. On February 10, 2015, just 2 days after Larry Harrison's murder, a heavy snowstorm hit Rochester, Minnesota. Despite the harsh weather, the police continued their investigation. That afternoon, Detective Sarah Brown discovered a crucial piece of evidence in an unexpected place. While searching through the house again, Detective Brown decided to take a closer look in the bedroom of Margaret Smith, Lauren's mother. Margaret, 64, lived with the Harrison family and had a history of mental health issues. Detective Brown found a series of hidden letters in Margaret's room. These letters were shocking and disturbing. The letters were addressed to Larry and were sexually explicit. They revealed that Margaret had a deep, unhealthy obsession with her son-in-law. She believed Larry was the reincarnation of her late husband, Edgar. This discovery changed the direction of the investigation dramatically. Detectives Brown and Gustafson immediately focused their attention on Margaret. They were stunned by the content of the letters. It was clear that Margaret's feelings for Larry were far from normal. The detectives also found that Margaret had recently stopped taking her medication for schizophrenia because she felt the drugs gave her tardive dyskinesia, a neurological disorder characterized by involuntary, repetitive movements, often resulting from long-term use of certain antipsychotic medications. The police interviewed Lauren again, this time asking about her mother. Lauren admitted that Margaret had always been very controlling and a little off. Margaret's mental health issues made her behavior unpredictable. Lauren was shocked to learn about the letters and the extent of her mother's obsession with Larry. Forensic experts analyzed the letters and confirmed they were written by Margaret. The police also looked into Margaret's medical records and found she had stopped taking her medication about a month before Larry's murder. This information suggested that Margaret's mental state might have played a role in the crime. The discovery of the letters was a turning point in the case. It provided the detectives with a new motive and a deeper understanding of the dynamics within the Harrison household. The investigation was far from over, but the police were getting closer to uncovering the truth about who killed Larry Harrison. The detectives now had a new prime suspect. Margaret's obsession with Larry, combined with her mental health issues, made her a likely candidate for the murder. However, they needed more evidence to make an arrest. As the investigation continued, the police turned their attention back to Margaret Smith, Larry's 64-year-old mother-in-law. Margaret lived with the Harrison family and had a history of mental health issues, including schizophrenia. She was taking medication that caused tardive dyskinesia, a condition that made her movements erratic. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Margaret in for a more thorough interrogation on February 12, 2015. Margaret was initially calm, but became defensive when asked about the sexually explicit letters she had written to Larry. She admitted to writing the letters, but claimed they were harmless expressions of her feelings. The detectives questioned Margaret about her relationship with Larry. She described him as a kind and caring man, but her obsession with him was clear. Margaret believed Larry was the reincarnation of her late husband, Edgar. This belief had driven her to write the letters and behave in a controlling manner toward her daughter, Lauren. Margaret's mental health issues were a significant factor in the investigation. The detectives learned that she had stopped taking her medication about a month before Larry's murder. This information suggested that Margaret's mental state might have played a role in the crime. The detectives also asked Margaret about her movements on the night of the murder. She claimed she was in her room with old episodes of gunsmoke and didn't hear anything unusual. However, her inconsistent responses and the disturbing content of the letters made the detectives suspicious. Forensic experts analyzed the knife used in the murder and found traces of Margaret's fingerprints. This evidence, combined with the letters and her erratic behavior, made her a strong suspect. The detectives also found that Margaret had a motive: her sexual obsession for Larry and her desire to keep control over Lauren and her grandson. Margaret's reactions during the interrogation ranged from calm to agitated. She insisted that she loved Larry and would never hurt him, but her responses were often confusing and contradictory. The detectives noted her unstable behavior and continued to press her for details. The investigation revealed that Margaret's mental health issues and obsession with Larry had created a dangerous situation. The combination of her stopping her medication and her irrational beliefs about Larry pointed to a possible motive for the murder. As the police gathered more evidence, they realized they needed to consider all angles. Margaret's mental state and her history of erratic behavior were crucial pieces of the puzzle. The detectives knew they had to be thorough in their investigation to ensure they uncovered the truth behind Larry Harrison's tragic death. On Valentine's Day 2015, the Rochester police made a breakthrough in the case. After collecting and analyzing all the evidence, they identified Margaret Smith, Larry's 64-year-old mother-in-law, as the murderer. Margaret, who lived with the Harrison family, had a long history of mental health issues. Her obsession with Larry and her deteriorating mental state had led to a tragic outcome. The police pieced together what happened on the night of the murder. Margaret had confronted Larry in the kitchen, cruelly demanding that he have sex with her. When Larry loudly refused, Margaret's obsession turned violent. She grabbed a kitchen knife and, in a fit of rage, stabbed Larry multiple times. The attack was frenzied, and Larry had tried to defend himself, but he couldn't escape. Detectives Gustafson and Brown, along with a team of officers, went to the Harrison home to arrest Margaret. It was early in the morning, around 6:00 a.m., when they arrived. Margaret was in her room, and when the police informed her of the charges, she initially appeared confused and then became hysterical. She kept screaming this Valentine's Day, "I give my heart to you, Larry," and claimed that Larry's death was an accident caused by her tardive dyskinesia, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The arrest shocked the entire Harrison family. Lauren and her son were devastated. They couldn't believe that Margaret, their mother and grandmother, could commit such a horrible act. The neighbors, who had always seen Margaret as a frail and eccentric old lady, were equally stunned. The community was in disbelief as news of the arrest spread. Lauren and her son struggled to come to terms with the revelation. They were torn between their grief for Larry and their disbelief about Margaret's actions. The arrest brought some closure to the case, but left the family in deep emotional turmoil. The police took Margaret into custody, and she was booked at the local jail. During the booking process, Margaret remained erratic and often incoherent. The police ensured that she received medical attention for her mental health issues, but her legal troubles were just beginning. The community, still reeling from Larry's murder, had mixed reactions. Some were relieved that the police had found the killer, while others were saddened by the tragic circumstances that led to the crime. The local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, covered the arrest extensively, adding to the public's shock and sorrow. The arrest of Margaret Smith marked a significant turning point in the investigation. The police had successfully identified and apprehended the murderer, but the road to justice was far from over. The next step would be the trial, where the full extent of Margaret's actions and the impact on the Harrison family would be revealed. Margaret Smith's trial began on April 20, 2016, at the Olmsted County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with members of the community, including Larry Harrison's family and friends. The trial attracted significant media attention, with local news outlets like the Rochester Post-Bulletin providing daily updates. The prosecutor, David Benedictus, 45, was known for his tough approach. He argued that Margaret's obsession with Larry and her decision to stop taking her medication led to the brutal murder. Benedictus presented the love letters as evidence of Margaret's unhealthy fixation and called on forensic experts to explain how the fingerprints on the knife matched Margaret's. Margaret's defense attorney, Linda Lou Green, 50, had a reputation for taking on challenging cases. She argued that Margaret's mental health issues and the side effects of her medication, including tardive dyskinesia, played a significant role in the incident. Green tried to convince the jury that the murder was not premeditated but a tragic accident. Throughout the trial, Larry's family was visibly emotional. Lauren Harrison and her son attended every day, struggling to process the loss of Larry and the betrayal by Margaret. The courtroom atmosphere was tense as each side presented its case. The jury deliberated for 2 days before reaching a verdict. On May 5, 2016, they found Margaret Smith guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison, considering her mental health issues but also acknowledging the severity of her crime. The verdict brought a sense of closure but also a deep sadness for Larry's family. Lauren expressed relief that justice had been served but was heartbroken over the loss of her husband and the actions of her mother. The community had mixed reactions, with some feeling the sentence was fair while others thought it was too lenient or too harsh. Margaret's reaction to the verdict was one of shock. She maintained that she never meant to kill Larry and claimed the murder was an accident. Her erratic behavior continued, and she was transferred to a facility where she could receive mental health treatment while serving her sentence. The prosecution's argument was strong, highlighting Margaret's obsession and the premeditated nature of the murder. David Benedictus was praised for his thorough work in securing the conviction. On the other hand, Linda Lou Green's defense was seen as compassionate but ultimately unconvincing to the jury. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a painful chapter for the Harrison family. Friends and neighbors offered their support, trying to help Lauren and her son move forward. The verdict and sentencing were widely covered by the media, bringing attention to the complexities of mental health in criminal cases. The impact of Larry Harrison's murder and the trial of Margaret Smith would be felt in Rochester for years to come. The community, while relieved that justice was served, remained deeply affected by the tragic events that unfolded in February 2015. After Margaret Smith's trial and sentencing, life slowly began to return to a new normal for the Harrison family and those involved in the case. For Lauren Harrison and her son, the aftermath of Larry's murder was a difficult journey of grief and healing. They received support from friends, neighbors, and the community who rallied around them during this challenging time. Lauren decided to move out of the house where the tragic event occurred. With the help of close friends and local volunteers, she found a new home in a quieter neighborhood of Rochester. She wanted to create a fresh start for herself and her son, away from the painful memories of their old house. In the months following the trial, Lauren focused on rebuilding her life. She returned to work at the Mayo Clinic, where she received support from colleagues and patients alike. Lauren's strength and resilience inspired many in the community who admired her courage in the face of adversity. Larry's colleagues at the local Applebee's where he worked also honored his memory. They organized the memorial service in March 2015, inviting friends, customers, and community members to celebrate Larry's life. The event featured heartfelt speeches, music, and a slideshow of photos showcasing Larry's dedication to his work and his love for his family. Meanwhile, Margaret Smith began serving her sentence at a state correctional facility. She received ongoing mental health treatment to manage her condition and the effects of her medication. Despite her tepid attempts to ask forgiveness for what she did, Margaret eventually succumbed to COVID-19 in May of 2021 and was buried without a gravestone in the jailhouse cemetery. The Rochester community, though deeply affected by the events of February 2015, came together to support each other. Local organizations offered counseling services and support groups for those affected by violent crimes. The media continued to follow the aftermath of the case, highlighting the importance of mental health awareness and support for families dealing with loss. As time passed, Lauren Harrison and her son found ways to remember Larry's kindness and generosity. They visited his favorite places in Rochester and shared memories with friends and family. While the pain of losing Larry would always be with them, they focused on honoring his legacy and finding hope in the future. The impact of Larry Harrison's murder resonated throughout Rochester, reminding everyone of the fragility of life and the importance of community support. The Harrison family's journey through grief and healing served as a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of tragedy. Our story takes place in Fresno, California, during the month of August in 1994. The tranquil suburban neighborhood on Maplewood Drive was about to become the stage for a series of heinous crimes. The first victim, Claire Bealey, was a cheerful and friendly homemaker who lived a seemingly ordinary life. At the age of 50, Claire was known for her love of gardening and baking, her passion for nurturing both her family and her community. Claire, a devoted homemaker, found solace in her love for gardening and baking, activities that brought her immense joy. Alongside her beloved husband, Walter, a convenience store owner, and their 4 children, Carla, Lucky, Bruce, and Jody, Claire led what appeared to everyone to be an idyllic life. Claire's radiant personality and unwavering willingness to lend a helping hand left an indelible mark on her close-knit community. Her neighbors fondly recall the delectable aroma of her freshly baked goods wafting through the neighborhood, enticing everyone to indulge in her culinary delights. Claire's garden, a colorful tapestry of vibrant flowers and meticulously pruned hedges, has been the talk of the town for years, earning her accolades from local gardening enthusiasts. As August unfurled its scorching heat, little did anyone suspect the dark secret that lurked beneath Claire's seemingly idyllic life. The tranquil streets of Fresno were blissfully unaware of the storm that would unleash tragedy within the Bealey household. It was a scorching hot summer day on August 15, 1994, in Fresno, California. The city was buzzing with excitement as news of the upcoming release of the hit movie Forrest Gump spread like wildfire. Little did the residents know that tragedy was about to strike the peaceful Beeley household. Claire's life was abruptly cut short, her vibrant existence snuffed out within the confines of her own home. It was her husband, Walter, who discovered her lifeless body in their modest home. The scene that unfolded before him was nothing short of horrifying. Claire, a loving wife and mother of 4, had been brutally beaten to death in her own home. As the news of Claire's untimely demise spread like wildfire, the community was gripped with fear and confusion. The local news outlets, such as the Fresno Bee and KSE 24, were quick to report on the tragic incident, capturing the attention of residents far and wide. Local authorities swiftly descended upon the scene, their investigation fueled by the urgency to bring justice to this heinous crime. The house, once a sanctuary of love and warmth, now stood as a haunting reminder of the dark reality that had unfolded within its walls. Rumors began to circulate, whispers of a shadowy figure lurking in the shadows, preying on innocent victims. Speculation mounted as the community grappled with the terrifying possibility that a serial killer was among them. Parents held their children a little tighter, and neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. August 1994 was a time of uncertainty, not only for the Beeley family but for the entire Fresno community. The scorching heat seemed to mirror the simmering tension that permeated the streets. People locked their doors and windows, desperate to protect themselves from an invisible menace that haunted their every thought. The Fresno Police Department swiftly responded to the distressing call on that scorching hot August day in 1994. Detectives Dougal Andrews and Joan Garza, known for their dedication to solving heinous crimes, arrived at the crime scene to unravel the perplexing puzzle surrounding Claire Beeley's untimely demise. Upon entering the house, the detectives were greeted by a scene of horror. The air hung heavy with the stench of violence and despair. The once vibrant and welcoming home now bore the marks of a brutal struggle. Bloodstains marred the walls, serving as a chilling testament to the brutality that had unfolded within these walls. As the detectives meticulously combed through the meticulously designed house, they meticulously documented each piece of meticulous evidence, determined to meticulously piece together the meticulous puzzle of Claire's tragic and meticulously violent end. They found a broken vase, meticulously shattered into countless meticulous fragments, its remnants meticulously scattered across the living room floor. The shards of glass glinted in the harsh light, mirroring the shattered lives left behind in the wake of this senseless act. In the kitchen, a half-empty bag of flour lay abandoned on the counter, its contents spilling out onto the pristine tiles. The detectives noted the fingerprints smudged on the bag, a potential clue that could lead them closer to the truth. They carefully collected samples, sealing them in plastic bags and labeling them with meticulous precision. The investigation was not confined to the crime scene alone. Detectives Andrews and Garza reached out to Claire's friends, neighbors, and colleagues, seeking any information that could help them crack the case. They pored over phone records, searching for any suspicious calls made in the days leading up to the tragic event. Every lead, no matter how small, was pursued with unwavering resolve. As the days turned into weeks, the detectives found themselves immersed in a web of interviews, forensic analysis, and tireless pursuit of justice. The city of Fresno held its breath, united in its collective desire to see the perpetrator brought to justice. The next victim in this bone-chilling tale is Henry Renvoke, a retired teacher who had spent his life imparting knowledge to the young minds of Fresno's public school system. At the age of 65, Henry was known for his warm and compassionate nature. He had dedicated his golden years to volunteering at the local library, sharing his love for books with the community. On the morning of August 17, 1994, tragedy struck once again. Henry's lifeless body was discovered beaten to death in his modest home in Fresno, California. The news of his murder sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community, leaving residents fearful and on edge yet again. Detectives Andrews and Garza of the Fresno PD, the same investigators who had been working tirelessly on Claire Beeley's case, were now faced with another perplexing crime scene. The room where Henry's body was found was in disarray, with furniture overturned and personal belongings scattered across the floor. It was a scene of chaos, a stark contrast to the calm and orderly life Henry was known to lead. As the detectives delved deeper into Henry's life, they discovered a possible motive for his murder. It seemed that Henry had recently come into possession of a valuable antique book, rumored to hold secrets of great historical significance. The book, known as Inner Art of the Egyptian Kings, by Austrian antiquarian Herr Johannes Wintergeist, was said to contain hidden codes and encrypted messages that could unlock a treasure trove of knowledge. The investigators also began to question a former student of Henry's, Peter Bosco, who had shown a keen interest in history during his time in Henry's class. Peter vehemently denied any involvement in the crime, expressing shock and disbelief at the news of his beloved teacher's death. He claimed that he had not seen or spoken to Henry in years, and that he had no knowledge of the mysterious antique book. The detectives continued to work tirelessly, sifting through the evidence and following every lead, determined to bring the perpetrator to justice. With the weight of the community's expectations on their shoulders, they knew that time was of the essence. In the scorching heat of August 20th, 1994, with the mercury reaching 105 degrees, a pivotal moment in the investigation sent shockwaves through the small community of Fresno, California. Judy Sinsalt Jackson, a distressed woman with a voice trembling with urgency, made a call to 911 that would forever alter the course of the case. She bravely declared, "My mother-in-law is a serial killer," and pointed a damning finger at Marjorie Jackson, her own mother-in-law. Despite Judy's insistence, the authorities were skeptical. They dismissed Judy's claims as the rantings of a hysterical woman and a disgruntled daughter-in-law, someone who, like many, was caught in the web of familial tensions and hated her mother-in-law. But little did they know, this call would hold the key to unlocking the true extent of Marjorie's sinister involvement. The city of Fresno, once named by USA Today in 1988 as America's friendliest city, was now gripped by fear and paranoia. Neighbors peered through their curtains, suspicious eyes scanning the streets for any sign of danger. Parents clutched their children a little tighter, afraid to let them out of their sight. In the summer of 1994, Fresno, California was grappling with a series of shocking murders that had left the community in a state of fear and uncertainty. The latest victim in this chilling tale was Jane Fasenra, a dedicated nurse and single mother. At the age of 40, Jane had devoted her life to caring for others at Fresno General Hospital, both at work and at home. Her professionalism and empathy had earned her the respect and admiration of her colleagues and patients alike. On a sweltering August evening, tragedy struck Jane's peaceful home. Her lifeless body was discovered by her 15-year-old son, Vrayler, who had returned from a friend's house to find his mother brutally beaten to death. The scene was a haunting one, with signs of a violent struggle that had taken place in the very place Jane should have felt safe. The police immediately sprang into action, their names becoming familiar to the residents of Fresno, Detectives Dougal Andrews and Joan Garza. With a meticulous approach, they combed through the crime scene, searching for any shred of evidence that could lead them to the perpetrator. The community held its breath, hoping that justice would be served and the killer apprehended. As the investigation unfolded, a possible motive began to emerge. Rachel Santos, a colleague of Jane's at Fresno General Hospital, found herself under the scrutiny of the detectives. The police believed that a personal grudge or a sexual rivalry could have driven Rachel to commit such a heinous act. But as they interrogated her, Rachel's response was one of genuine shock and confusion. She vehemently denied any involvement in Jane's murder, leaving the detectives back at square one. The media frenzy surrounding the case grew, with local news outlets reporting every development and speculation. The community was on high alert, locking their doors and looking over their shoulders, fearful of who the next victim might be. The name Marjorie Jackson had started to circulate, but without concrete evidence, the authorities were hesitant to act. As the summer heat continued to bear down on Fresno, the search for answers intensified. The detectives tirelessly pursued every lead, hoping to bring an end to the reign of terror that had gripped their city. They knew that time was of the essence, that another life hung in the balance. The shocking truth behind the heinous crimes that had plagued the quiet town of Fresno, California in August of 1994 finally came to light. The perpetrator, a seemingly innocuous 63-year-old mother-in-law named Marjorie Jackson, was unveiled as the true serial killer. Marjorie's motive for the murders was a deep-seated resentment towards her own son, Abel, whom she blamed for the troubles in her marriage to her alcoholic husband, Kevin. As the investigation unfolded, the police pieced together the puzzle of Marjorie's sinister actions. It was revealed that Marjorie meticulously planned each murder, leaving behind no trace of her involvement. Her calculated moves kept the authorities baffled until a crucial turning point in the case occurred. On August 20th, 1994, a call was made to 911. A woman named Judy Sinsalt Jackson, who happened to be Marjorie's daughter-in-law, bravely stepped forward with a shocking revelation. She declared, "My mother-in-law is a serial killer," and explicitly named Marjorie Jackson as the true perpetrator behind the string of murders that had terrorized the community. However, the police dismissed Judy's claims. They dismissed her as a hysterical woman, blinded by her grievances against her mother-in-law. However, unbeknownst to them, Judy's call would prove to be the turning point in the investigation. As the detectives revisited the evidence, they began to connect the dots. They discovered a pattern that tied Marjorie to each of the victims. The meticulous planning, the calculated timing, and the brutal nature of the murders all pointed towards Marjorie's involvement. It became clear that she had carefully selected her victims, targeting those who had some connection to her own family, as Claire was once Abel's sex partner, Henry was Abel's history teacher, and Abel was the secret father of Rayler, Jane's son. The media frenzy surrounding the case intensified as the truth unfolded. Local newspapers such as the Fresno Bee and television news channels like KSE24 covered the story extensively, capturing the shock and disbelief that reverberated through the community. Residents were left in a state of fear and disbelief, realizing that a serial killer had been operating right under their noses. On the brutally hot day of August 25, 1994, the Fresno Police Department made a breakthrough in their investigation into a string of grisly murders that had plagued the community. The prime suspect, Marjorie Jackson, a seemingly unassuming 63-year-old mother-in-law, was finally apprehended, bringing an end to her reign of terror. The arrest of Marjorie Jackson sent shockwaves through the victims' families and the entire community. For weeks, they had lived in fear, wondering who could be responsible for the brutal deaths of their loved ones. The capture of Marjorie brought a sense of relief, but also a deep sense of betrayal. How could someone so close, someone they had trusted, be capable of such heinous acts? The arrest of Marjorie Jackson was a significant moment in Fresno's history. The media coverage surrounding the case was extensive, with newspapers and television stations reporting on every detail. The community grappled with the realization that evil could lurk in their midst, even within their own families. As Marjorie was led away in handcuffs, her face a mix of surprise and resignation, the community began the process of healing. The scars left by her crimes would forever remain, but with her capture, they could finally start to find closure. The trial that followed the shocking revelations of Marjorie Jackson's crimes was a riveting courtroom drama that captivated California's Central Valley. District Attorney Paula Ingretza led the prosecution, presenting a compelling case against the seemingly innocuous mother-in-law turned serial killer. Defense attorney Valerie Lindenscope fought tooth and nail to cast doubt on the evidence, but the weight of the facts proved insurmountable. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to witness justice being served. Media outlets, including the renowned Fresno Bee and Los Angeles Times, covered the trial, providing updates on the proceedings. The tension in the air was palpable as the victims' families, still reeling from the loss of their loved ones, watched with a mix of anger, grief, and hope for justice. The prosecution meticulously presented the evidence, painting a vivid picture of Marjorie's motive and modus operandi. They called upon expert witnesses, such as renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Jacob Rolshaden, who testified to the brutality of the murders and the consistency of Marjorie's methods. The defense, on the other hand, attempted to poke holes in the prosecution's case, questioning the reliability of certain witnesses and raising doubts about the credibility of the evidence. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom was filled with emotional testimonies from friends, neighbors, and colleagues of the victims. They spoke of the impact the victims had on their lives and the void left by their untimely deaths. The prosecution also presented chilling evidence, including Marjorie's meticulously kept journal, in which she detailed her dark thoughts and plans for each murder. Judge William bathtub commerce presided over the trial, ensuring that both sides had a fair opportunity to present their case. He meticulously reviewed the evidence and provided clear instructions to the jury, emphasizing the importance of impartiality and the need to consider only the facts presented in the courtroom. After days of deliberation, the jury rendered their verdict, guilty. The courtroom erupted in applause and tears as the victim's family finally found some closure. Judge Commerce, in delivering the sentence, expressed his disgust at Marjorie's actions, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trial of Marjorie Jackson will forever be remembered as a chilling reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. It serves as a testament to the dedication and perseverance of law enforcement officials, prosecutors, and the justice system as a whole in bringing criminals to justice. In the wake of the trial, the lives of those involved took divergent paths. Judy Sinsall Jackson, the daughter-in-law who inadvertently exposed Marjorie as the serial killer, found solace in the support of her family and friends. She sought therapy to cope with the trauma of discovering the dark secret lurking within her own home. Judy's resilience and determination to rebuild her life earned her admiration from her community and the media, who dubbed her the boy who cried wolf of Fresno. She would go on to become an advocate for victims of domestic violence, using her own experience to shed light on the hidden dangers that can exist within families. Abel Jackson, the son of serial killer Marjorie Jackson and the alleged reason for the murders, struggled to come to terms with the shocking revelation that his own mother had been a murderer. He sought solace in the arms of his wife and children, finding strength in their love and support. Abel, a talented artist, channeled his pain into his work, creating hauntingly beautiful portraits of his mother and the other victims. His artwork was featured in a local gallery. The victims' families, united in their grief, formed a support group to navigate the complex emotions that accompanied their unimaginable loss. They met regularly, sharing stories and memories of their loved ones, finding comfort in the understanding and empathy of those who had experienced similar tragedies. Together, they created a memorial garden in Fresno's Woodward Park, a serene oasis where the names of the victims were etched into a marble monument, forever honoring their memory. As the years passed, the wounds slowly healed, but the scars remained. The victims' families found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served and their loved ones could finally rest in peace. The community, forever changed by the events of that fateful summer in 1994, vowed to never forget the lives lost to Marjorie Jackson's reign of terror. And so, we reached the end of this harrowing tale. In Fresno, California, in August of 1994, the lives of Claire Bealey, Henry Rinvoke, and Jane Fasenra were tragically cut short by the hands of Marjorie Jackson, a mother-in-law turned serial killer. Through meticulous police work and the strength of the victims' families, justice was served. This story serves as a chilling reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, even within our own families. Maria Rodarty Sullivan was a vibrant 38-year-old woman known for her artistic talents and kind-hearted nature. She lived in Summerville, South Carolina, a small town known for its charming downtown and the annual Flower Town Festival. Maria worked as a freelance artist, creating beautiful paintings and sculptures that she sold at local art fairs and galleries. Maria lived with her husband, David Sullivan, and her 18-year-old stepson, Tyler. David was a retired naval officer, and they had been married for 10 years. Despite their 20-year age difference, Maria and David were deeply in love. They met at a local art show where Maria's work was being displayed. David was immediately drawn to her creativity and passion for life. Maria tried her best to create a happy and harmonious home. She balanced her freelance work with managing the household and caring for Tyler. She was a motherly figure to Tyler, who had lost his biological mother a few years earlier. Maria and Tyler's relationship was said to be strained, but she remained hopeful that they could eventually bond. In her free time, Maria enjoyed reading and gardening. She was a big fan of classic literature, often quoting Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters. Her garden was filled with vibrant flowers, a testament to her love for nature. Maria was also active in the local community, volunteering at the Somerville Public Library and participating in neighborhood events. In the days leading up to her death, Maria was excited about a new art project. She was working on a series of sculptures inspired by the local wildlife and landscapes of South Carolina. Maria planned to showcase these pieces at the upcoming Flower Town Festival. She was also looking forward to a small family getaway she had planned, hoping it would help mend the strained relationship between her and Tyler. Maria's friends described her as charismatic and friendly. She had a close-knit social circle and was always willing to lend a helping hand. Her friends recalled how Maria would often host dinner parties, cooking delicious meals, and creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Despite the challenges in her life, Maria remained optimistic and full of dreams. She hoped to open her own art gallery someday and inspire others with her work. Tragically, her dreams were cut short by a brutal and senseless act of violence. Maria's life was a testament to her resilience and creativity, and her loss was deeply felt by all who knew her. On the morning of September 12, 2012, Somerville was just waking up. It was a cool, clear day, with the sun shining brightly. Around 8:30 a.m., Maria Rodarty Sullivan's neighbor, Lilybeth Carter, walked over to the Sullivan house. Lilybeth, who was 25 years old, lived next door. She often visited Maria to discuss her true crime novel, which she was working on based on real-life events. Lilybeth knocked on the door, but no one answered. She found this odd because Maria was usually up early, working in her art studio. The studio was a small, separate building in the backyard. Lilybeth decided to check there. As she approached the studio, she noticed the door was slightly open. When Lilybeth entered, she was greeted by a horrific scene. Maria was lying on the floor, covered in blood. The room was in chaos, with broken sculptures and shattered glass everywhere. Maria's body showed signs of a violent struggle. Lilybeth was shocked and horrified. Her hands trembled as she quickly dialed 911 on her cell phone. The 911 operator, calming Lilybeth as best they could, instructed her to stay outside and wait for the police. Lilybeth, still in shock, followed the instructions. She stood in the yard, staring at the studio, trying to process what she had just seen. The police arrived within minutes. As they began their investigation, they noted the heavy sculpture near Maria's body. It was clear this was the murder weapon, used to inflict multiple blunt force trauma injuries. The amount of blood and the state of the studio indicated a frenzied attack. Lilybeth was interviewed by the police. She was still shaken but managed to provide a clear account of her morning. She described her relationship with Maria and her reasons for visiting. Her detailed observations helped the investigators piece together the timeline of events leading up to the discovery of Maria's body. The discovery of Maria Rodarty Sullivan's body marked the beginning of a complex and emotional investigation. Her friends and neighbors were left in shock, struggling to understand how such a brutal crime could happen in their peaceful community. When the police arrived at the Sullivan house on the morning of September 12, 2012, they knew they had a serious crime on their hands. It was a sunny day in Somerville, and the peaceful neighborhood was quickly disturbed by the flashing lights and sirens of police cars. Detective Martin Coco, a seasoned investigator known for his thoroughness, led the team. With him was Officer Julia Montes, who was respected for her calm and methodical approach. They had both seen many crime scenes, but the brutality of this one stood out. The art studio where Maria's body was found was a small building in the backyard. As they entered, the detectives were met with a gruesome sight. Blood was splattered on the walls, and the floor was covered with broken sculptures and shattered glass. The room looked like a scene from a horror movie, a far cry from the creative space it usually was. Maria's body lay on the floor, showing signs of a violent struggle. It was clear that she had been beaten to death with a heavy sculpture found nearby. The sculpture was stained with blood, indicating it was the murder weapon. Maria had multiple blunt force trauma injuries, suggesting a frenzied and brutal attack. The police immediately began their investigation. They cordoned off the area to preserve evidence. Detective Coco and Officer Montes carefully examined the crime scene, looking for any clues. They used advanced forensic techniques, including fingerprint dusting and blood pattern analysis, to piece together what had happened. The detectives worked quickly but meticulously. They collected samples of blood and hair for DNA analysis and took photographs of the scene from every angle. They also found a few items that seemed out of place, like a torn piece of cloth and a broken piece of jewelry, which they bagged as evidence. Outside, neighbors gathered, watching with a mix of fear and curiosity. The police asked anyone who had seen or heard anything unusual to come forward. They also conducted door-to-door interviews to gather more information about the hours leading up to the discovery of Maria's body. As the day went on, the police presence grew. Additional officers arrived to help with the investigation, and the media started to gather, drawn by the shocking nature of the crime. News reporters from local stations like WCIV and the Post and Courier began reporting live from the scene, adding to the growing sense of urgency. By the end of the day, the police had gathered a substantial amount of evidence, but many questions remained. Who could have done this, and why? Detective Coco and Officer Montes knew they had a long road ahead, but they were determined to find justice for Maria. David Sullivan, Maria's husband, was the first suspect the police investigated. David, who was 58 years old, had a disciplined and stoic personality, shaped by his years of service in the Navy. He married Maria 10 years ago, providing her with stability and support. Despite his stern exterior, David was deeply in love with Maria and very protective of his family. On September 12, 2012, after the police discovered Maria's body, they brought David in for questioning. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes conducted the interview. David appeared calm, but was clearly shaken by the news of his wife's death. He told the detectives that he had been away on a business trip, staying at a Hampton Inn in Boston. He provided hotel receipts and a confirmation of his check-in and check-out times to back up his alibi. David's interview lasted several hours. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Maria and any possible enemies she might have had. David spoke about the tensions between Maria and his son Tyler. He mentioned that Tyler had been acting out since the death of his biological mother and struggled to accept Maria as a mother figure. David believed that despite these challenges, the family would eventually reconcile. The police also searched the Sullivan home for additional evidence. They went through David's belongings and searched his car, but found nothing suspicious. They interviewed David's colleagues and checked his phone records, all of which confirmed his alibi. Throughout the investigation, David maintained his composure. However, the strain was visible. He expressed his grief and disbelief that someone could harm Maria. He was cooperative with the police and provided them with any information they requested. Meanwhile, the local news outlets, such as WCIV and the Post and Courier, reported on the investigation. Neighbors and friends of the Sullivans were shocked to hear that David was a suspect. Many described him as a kind and loving husband who would never harm his wife. Despite his strong alibi, the police continued to investigate David to ensure nothing was overlooked. They re-examined the crime scene and cross-checked all the details of his alibi. Detective Coco and Officer Montes wanted to be thorough, leaving no stone unturned. As days passed, it became clear that David was not involved in Maria's murder. The focus of the investigation shifted to other potential suspects. While David was cleared, the pain of losing Maria and being under suspicion was a heavy burden he had to bear. On September 15, 2012, just 3 days after the discovery of Maria's body, Somerville was covered in a light drizzle. The gray skies matched the somber mood in the town. Around noon, while reviewing the evidence collected from the crime scene, Detective Martin Coco noticed something unusual. Hidden among Maria's art supplies in her studio were dozens of letters. These were not just any letters, but sexually explicit love letters exchanged between Maria and someone else. Detective Coco and Officer Julia Montes carefully read through the letters. The content revealed a secret affair between Maria and an unidentified individual. The letters spoke graphically of secret sex acts and deep, conflicting emotions. This discovery was a significant breakthrough in the case and suggested a possible motive for the murder. Detective Coco called for a meeting with the entire investigative team. They discussed the contents of the letters and the implications, but he knew they had to identify the other person involved in the affair to understand the full context and potential motives. Officer Montes led the effort to gather more information. She visited Maria's close friends and neighbors, asking if anyone knew about the affair. Many were shocked and had no idea Maria was involved with someone other than her husband, David. The news quickly spread through the small, very conservative Southern community, creating a buzz of gossip and speculation. Meanwhile, forensic experts analyzed the letters for fingerprints and DNA evidence. They also checked Maria's phone records and email history to find clues about her secret lover. The investigation was thorough, and every detail was scrutinized. On the same rainy afternoon, while examining Maria's phone, the detectives found a series of explicit text messages and call logs that led them to suspect Tyler, Maria's 18-year-old stepson. The messages hinted at a strained and complicated sexual relationship between Maria and Tyler. Some of the texts were heated, while others were more explicit and graphically described their sexual relationship. Detective Coco and Officer Montes were shocked by this new revelation. Tyler had always been seen as a troubled teenager, But the extent of his relationship with Maria was unexpected. The detectives knew they had to approach this delicately to get to the truth. The discovery of the love letters and text messages shifted the focus of the investigation. The police now had a clearer direction, and the pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together. They prepared to interrogate Tyler again, this time with new, compelling evidence that could unlock the secrets behind Maria's tragic death. Tyler Sullivan, Maria's 18-year-old stepson, became the focus of the investigation after the discovery of the love letters and text messages. Tyler was a troubled teenager, still struggling with the death of his biological mother and the arrival of Maria into his life. He often acted out, showing signs of resentment towards Maria for taking his mother's place. Despite this, he was intelligent and ambitious, with a passion for music. He spent hours playing his guitar, dreaming of becoming a famous musician. On September 16, 2012, Tyler was brought in for questioning. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes conducted the interview. Tyler appeared nervous but tried to remain calm. The detectives began by asking him about his relationship with Maria. Tyler admitted that their relationship was strained, but denied any involvement in her murder. When the detectives presented the love letters, Tyler's demeanor changed. He became visibly upset and defensive. He confessed to the affair, explaining that they started having sex about a year ago. Tyler said he became obsessed with Maria, believing that they could be together if his father David were out of the picture. However, Maria tried to end the affair and focus on her marriage, which frustrated Tyler. The detectives pressed Tyler for more details. They asked him about the night of Maria's murder. Tyler claimed he was at a friend's house, watching movies. The police checked his alibi, but it was weak and lacked concrete evidence. His friend Jake said Tyler was with him, but couldn't remember specific details or times. Tyler's reaction to the interrogation was a mix of anger and fear. He was defensive and argumentative, denying any involvement in the murder while expressing his frustration over Maria ending the affair. The detectives noted his conflicting emotions, which seemed to oscillate between sadness and anger. While Tyler was a prime suspect, the police needed more evidence to link him directly to the crime. They continued to analyze the physical evidence from the crime scene and cross-referenced it with Tyler's statements. The detectives also reviewed security camera footage from the neighborhood, hoping to find any inconsistencies in Tyler's alibi. The investigation into Tyler was intense and thorough. Detective Thompson and Officer Montes were determined to uncover the truth. They knew Tyler had a motive, but they needed solid evidence to prove his involvement. The love letters and text messages were crucial, but they had to build a strong case. The investigation was far from over, and the detectives continued to piece together the puzzle. Tyler remained a key figure in the case, and the police were determined to find justice for Maria. Lilybeth Carter, the Sullivans' 25-year-old neighbor, became another person of interest in the investigation. Lilybeth lived next door and frequently visited the Sullivan house. She had a keen interest in true crime stories and was working on a novel based on real-life events. Lilybeth was known for her observant nature and was often seen taking notes and photos around the neighborhood. On September 17, 2012, the police brought Lilybeth in for questioning. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes conducted the interview. Lilybeth appeared calm and cooperative. She explained that she had a passion for writing and was fascinated by true crime. She often visited Maria to discuss her novel and get feedback on her writing. The detectives asked Lilybeth about the morning she discovered Maria's body. Lilybeth recounted the events in detail, describing how she found the studio door slightly open and discovered Maria lying on the floor. She spoke about her shock and horror and how she immediately called 911. The detectives noted that Lilybeth's account was consistent with the initial report. As the questioning continued, the detectives probed deeper into Lilybeth's relationship with the Sullivans. Lilybeth admitted that she often observed the family dynamics, noting the tension between Maria and Tyler. She also mentioned that she had seen Tyler acting suspiciously on several occasions, but didn't think much of it at the time. The detectives asked Lilybeth about her interest in true crime and whether it influenced her actions. Lilybeth explained that her interest was purely academic and creative. She was writing a novel and used her observations to create realistic characters and scenarios. She denied any involvement in Maria's murder and insisted that she was just a concerned neighbor. Lilybeth's calm and cooperative demeanor made it difficult for the detectives to determine if she was hiding anything. They decided to search her house for any evidence that might link her to the crime. They found several notebooks filled with detailed observations about the neighborhood and the Sullivans, but nothing directly incriminating. Despite her cooperation, Lilybeth remained a person of interest. The detectives continued to monitor her closely, looking for any inconsistencies in her story. They also reviewed the security footage from the neighborhood, hoping to find any evidence that could either implicate or clear her. As the investigation into Lilybeth continued, the detectives faced the challenge of distinguishing between her genuine interest in true crime and any potential involvement in Maria's death. The complexity of the case deepened, but the police remained committed to finding the truth and bringing justice for Maria. On September 20, 2012, the investigation took a significant turn. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes had gathered enough evidence to identify the murderer. The evidence pointed to Tyler Sullivan, Maria's 18-year-old stepson. Tyler's conflicting emotions and erratic behavior had raised suspicions from the start, but it was the discovery of his fingerprints on the murder weapon that sealed his fate. Tyler was known to be a troubled teenager. He struggled with the recent death of his biological mother and resented Maria for taking her place. Despite his intelligence and passion for music, Tyler's feelings for Maria had evolved into a dangerous mix of hatred and desire. When Maria confronted him about his failing grades and her decision to end their secret affair, Tyler snapped. In a fit of rage and obsession, he attacked her with a heavy sculpture from her studio. The detectives had pieced together the events of that fateful day. Tyler had been at the house, waiting for the right moment. When Maria entered the studio, he followed her. The confrontation escalated quickly, and in his fury, Tyler grabbed the sculpture and struck Maria multiple times, leading to her death. With the evidence in hand, the police prepared to arrest Tyler. On the evening of September 20, they arrived at the Sullivan home. Tyler was in his room, listening to music on his iPod. When the officers entered, Tyler seemed surprised but didn't resist arrest. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station for processing. David Sullivan, Tyler's father, was devastated by the news. He couldn't believe that his son was capable of such a brutal act. The family was torn apart by the revelation, and the community was equally shocked. Neighbors and friends who had known Tyler as a quiet, troubled teen now saw him in a completely different light. The police detailed the evidence during a press conference, explaining how Tyler's obsession with Maria and his inability to control his emotions led to the murder. The discovery of the sexually explicit letters and Tyler's fingerprints on the murder weapon were critical pieces of the puzzle that helped solve the case. As Tyler was taken away, his reaction was a mix of anger and resignation. He knew the evidence against him was overwhelming, and there was no escape from the consequences of his actions. Maria's friends and family were relieved that the murderer had been caught, but the pain of losing Maria remained. The arrest of Tyler Sullivan brought some closure to the case, but the journey to justice was far from over. The next step was the trial, where the full extent of Tyler's actions and motives would be revealed. The trial of Tyler Sullivan began on November 5, 2012, in Summerville, South Carolina. The courtroom was filled with reporters, friends, and family members, all eager to hear the details of the case. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney James Bliver, a seasoned lawyer known for his tenacity and thoroughness. He was 45 years old, with a stern demeanor that commanded respect. Bliver argued that Tyler's obsession with Maria, coupled with his anger over her ending their affair, led him to commit the brutal murder. He presented the love letters, text messages, and the forensic evidence linking Tyler to the crime. The prosecution's case was solid, painting a clear picture of Tyler's motive and actions. The defense was handled by public defender Sarah Jane Lemon, a compassionate and determined attorney who had been practicing law for over 20 years. She was 42 years old and known for her dedication to her clients. Lemon argued that Tyler was a troubled teenager who had been deeply affected by his mother's death and was struggling with mental health issues. She claimed that Tyler's actions were not premeditated but a result of emotional turmoil and confusion. Throughout the trial, the emotional toll on Maria's family was evident. Her husband, David Sullivan, sat in the front row, his face etched with grief and disbelief. Friends and family members wept quietly as they listened to the details of Maria's tragic death. After several weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On December 3, 2012, they returned with a verdict. Tyler Sullivan was found guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Tyler showed little emotion, his face blank as he listened to his fate. The sentencing took place on December 10, 2012, Tyler was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge stated that while Tyler's actions were driven by emotional distress, the brutality of the crime warranted a severe punishment. The sentence aimed to provide justice for Maria and her family while acknowledging Tyler's troubled background. Maria's family had mixed reactions to the sentence. Some felt it was too lenient, given the nature of the crime, while others believed it was a fair balance between justice and compassion for Tyler's mental state. The community of Somerville was left to grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy, hoping to find some sense of closure. The trial and sentencing of Tyler Sullivan were widely covered by local media, including WCIV and the Post and Courier. The case served as a somber reminder of the impact of emotional and mental health issues and the devastating consequences they can have. After Tyler Sullivan was sentenced to 25 years in prison, life in Somerville, South Carolina, began to slowly move forward. The trial had been a traumatic experience for everyone involved, leaving lasting impacts on the community. David Sullivan, Maria's husband, struggled to cope with the loss of his wife and the imprisonment of his son. He took a leave of absence from his job and sought counseling to deal with his grief and the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Friends and neighbors provided support, but David often felt isolated. He decided to move to Charleston to start fresh, away from the painful memories in Somerville. Tyler's incarceration was a difficult adjustment for him as well. He was sent to a state correctional facility where he began receiving psychological counseling. The prison system offered educational programs, and Tyler enrolled in classes to complete his high school education and began studying music theory, still clinging to his dream of becoming a musician someday. Lilybeth Carter, the neighbor and true crime enthusiast, was deeply affected by the entire ordeal. She continued to write her novel, now incorporating the harrowing experience she had lived through. The local media, including WCIV and the Post and Courier, feature interviews with Lilybeth, discussing her perspective on the case. Despite the unwanted attention, Lilybeth remained focused on her writing, finding solace in her creative work. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes, the lead investigators, received commendations for their diligent work in solving the case. The success of their investigation reinforced their commitment to justice and the importance of thorough police work. The case also highlighted the need for increased support for mental health issues, both within families and the broader community. Life in Somerville gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the memory of Maria Rodarty Sullivan and the tragic events that unfolded remained etched in the hearts of those who knew her. The town's resolve to support mental health initiatives and honor Maria's legacy became a lasting tribute to her life.